Alderman Wilson.
Here.
Alderman Holmes.
Here. Peter.
Alderman Tindem. Alderman Grover.
Here.
Alderman Rainey. Alderman Burrus. Alderman Fisk.
Here.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Here.
It's 7.
We have a quorum. Welcome to the Monday, July 18th, 2011 meeting of the Evanston City Council. The first item is Mayor's public announcements. I only have one, a thank you to State Senator Jeff Schoenberg for helping us to get 3 new viaducts worth $10 million. Desperately needed, and he's worked on it for years. So thank you, Jeff. City Manager, do you have presentations and announcements?
Yes, I do, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. First, I'd like to call Deputy Police Chief Barb Weedland up. She has an update on some activities from over the weekend, as well as an invitation to some events next month. Chief Weedland.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members, City Manager BOBKIEWICZ, and City Clerk Green. I'm here tonight on behalf of Chief Eddington and the Evanston Police Department to invite members of the City Council and Evanston residents to witness our deployment strategy in action. This will be a unique opportunity for citizens to see firsthand the pre-planning and real-time decisions that shape the delivery of services in the City of Evanston. For example, visitors will review the deployment maps that depict the prior week's, the prior week's crime patterns and understand how these maps drive the deployment strategy. Also, real-time digital images used by the commanders for immediate deployment decisions will be available for public viewing. A summary of major criminal cases will be presented during these gatherings. The sessions will take place on the following dates from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Saturday, August 13th at the Evanston Police Department, Saturday, August 20th at the Fleetwood Jourdain, and Saturday, August 27th at the Howard Street Outpost. I would also like to extend an invitation to members of the City Council to attend our weekly deployment meetings. If any of you are interested, please contact Chief Eddington or me, and we'll send you the deployment dates and times. As you know, on Saturday, EPD responded to a death investigation in the 1200 block of Dodge. The autopsy was performed this morning, and the death was ruled a homicide due to the multiple injuries the victim sustained. State's attorney is at the Evanston Police Department now conducting interviews, and charges are pending. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Weedland. I'd next like to ask Catherine Hurley, our Sustainable Programs Coordinator, to make an announcement regarding the upcoming recycling fair.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, City Manager BOBKIEWICZ, and City Clerk Green. The City of Evanston's Public Works Department will be hosting a recycling fair this Saturday, July 23rd, from 9 a.m. to noon at the Lorraine H. Morton Civic Center parking lot here at 2200 Ridge Avenue. At the fair, residents can recycle a variety of items, secure recycling education materials, sign up for a waste audit, and get a closer look at some of the streets and sanitation department heavy equipment. Here at the fair, residents will have the opportunity to recycle a variety of electronics, including cell phones, computers and computer monitors, DVDs and VHS players, if there's still some VHS players out there, printers and scanners, TVs, and even video game consoles, just to name a few, as well as, new this year, hangers, plastic bags, prescription drugs, batteries, CFL light bulbs, and even ink cartridges. There will also be a document destruction services allowing residents to bring up to 5 banker boxes of paper to be shredded and disposed of on site. Additionally, the first 250 residents will have the opportunity to obtain a repurposed refuse cart that can be used for composting. These 95-gallon composting bins are large and will not have wheels on them, so residents are encouraged to bring a vehicle that's large enough to transport your bin away. Residents who participate in our pilot composting bin program will also receive a manual with tips and guidance on how to compost. Finally, the City of Evanston and Groot will also have their large equipment staged for kids to view and touch. Other opportunities at the fair also include meeting representatives from various city departments to learn about initiatives taking place in Evanston, as well as another opportunity to sign up for our Cub Energy Saver Big 7 Savers Challenge to get your chance to win a free year's worth of electricity. Now, there are going to be lots of cars coming in this direction, so it's important to note that the staging point for car lineups is set to be Brown and Simpson, proceeding east from Green Bay Road. Residents will meet with city personnel who will guide them to the proper stages. We'll have some things here and some things at the service center. Parking for people who want to come after their document destruction or just to visit the variety of items at the fair can park at the Northwestern University lot at the northwest corner of Leon Place and Ridge Avenue. Lots of additional details are on the city's website, or you can call 311. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. The next item, Madam Mayor, members of the council, if you recall, and I know you all do, a few weeks back we had a lengthy power outage, and at your last council meeting you thought it would be a good idea to ask a representative from ComEd to speak about that power outage. Well, wouldn't you know, since then we had another lengthy power outage last week that lasted a good part of the week for many of our residents. I'd like to recognize first, Dave Stonebeck. Dave is our Utilities Director, did a really outstanding job of coordinating the City of Evanston's response, working very closely with ComEd representatives. And Dave, I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly thank you and members of the Utility Department for your excellent work. One of the major causes, if not the major cause, of the power outages were trees and the downing of many trees throughout the community, and would also like to recognize the fine work of our Forestry Division from our Department of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services. Our forestry staff did an outstanding job of responding to residents throughout the city, cleaning up, cutting down, and also providing technical assistance for those property owners who found their own trees injured or downed, and we worked very closely through our forestry staff, Paul DiAgostino and his fine crew, working as well as with Dave Stonebeck and others on that. So I'd like also to recognize our fine forestry division staff for their good work. And then there was Commonwealth Edison. Eric DeRay is here representing Commonwealth Edison, and we've asked him prior to last week's outage to come and talk. He's here this evening, and so Eric, I saw you earlier. I know you're here. If you'd like to come up and make a presentation and answer questions.
Good evening, City staff, and thank you for the introduction. City Manager BOBKIEWICZ. Also with me tonight is the Director of our External Affairs and Large Customer Services organization, Art Barcema, here to also assist with either the presentation or answer any questions. And my thanks also goes out to the City of Evanston in terms of the Public Works Staff Utilities Department as well. Certainly it's a collaborative and cooperative effort anytime that we have storms of this type of magnitude that come through. Not only does it include those folks, but also our city council members, aldermen, especially those raising attentions to where we need to get to priority restoration, including things like traffic intersections, things that will get us moving along so we can get power back onto residents. So we've been asked by City Manager BOBKIEWICZ as well, again, to talk about some of the things that have impacted this community within the last 30 days. And we've had 3 significant events that have happened here in Evanston. Certainly Evanston's not alone. Our North Shore area and certainly our whole service territory was impacted by these tremendous storms. Many of you have seen it on the television news, so you've seen a good deal of the devastation that was caused not only in your own community, but throughout our service territory. With that, let me go ahead and start the presentation. I'm going to cover 3 dates. The very first one starting June 21st. So on June 21st, just to give you kind of the level of impact or magnitude, there were 2 confirmed tornadoes, not necessarily here in Evanston, but there was 2 tornadoes that moved in, one in the Downers Grove area and one in Mount Prospect. And these were confirmed winds anywhere between 86 and 110 miles an hour. There was certainly destruction, certainly accompanying those as well. We did have other reports throughout the service territory with various wind speeds anywhere between 70 and 80 miles an hour. And just a couple of data points on here. Accompanied with that storm on June 21st, you had 11,000 lightning strokes. Lightning strokes many times will go ahead and damage our lines directly, sometimes damage transformers and equipment that will cause power outages on the system. We took a little bit of liberty in terms of the Chicago Tribune, and just, I'm sure many people will read it. I won't spend much time on this slide, but the tornado itself and some of the information that came from that, we excerpted from WGN. And again, it just kind of details just where these tornadoes were spotted, the wind speeds, and the approximate times that they came in. And you might start seeing things called bow echoes, and you might hear of dare echoes and other types of terms being used on the news these days. And these are storms that are unique. They're not something that's commonplace. This is not just light winds blowing in. It's not just sustained winds of 30 and 40 miles an hour. These are very devastating storms that are coming in and doing damage to our system. A little bit more data on there too, again, just kind of clocking some of the areas around where high winds were reported. Wheeling, not too far west and north suburb, 81 miles an hour. And you can see some of the other data points in terms of Indiana and a few other locations. And again, the predicted heat indexes in terms of the weather. So we all know we're under certainly a weather advisory right now in terms of our heat index as well. And storms will certainly contribute to damaging our system in those conditions. More specifically, in terms of this storm, level of impact, and people want to know, well, what was the number of customers that were out of power? So we had 440,000 people out in this June 21st storm. And you can see the breakdown in percentages, and we'll talk about 4 different regions. Specifically, you're included in the north region as the city of Evanston. And you can see Evanston was in the region that was hit the hardest with 53% of the outage interruptions. So that's basically 200,000 people just within a geographic north area of the border of the city of Chicago, roughly up to the Wisconsin border. And I manage on a day-to-day basis 20 communities, Evanston being one of those, of course. And just within my small geographic area, of the 20 communities I manage, which is about the city of Chicago border, up to about Route 22, there's about 80,000 customers that were out of power within that 200,000 subset for the North region. So that's a lot of customers in a small condensed area, and I think that depicts that on this chart here. You can see the areas. You may not be able to see, but there's red and black blotches on there, and that's accounting for customers out of power in excess of 10,000, 20,000, and numbers go up. There's a associated grid on a different slide. But again, so the highest impact really resided in our north region. Hardest hit areas, of course, north and west and the south and the west suburbs of Chicago, and trees, as well as Manager Bobkiewicz kind of kicked off before we were introduced. Trees accounted for 50% of all the customer outages. And you can imagine not only just the trees, but then you talk about lightning, and then you talk about the winds themselves. So if a tree didn't follow the line, certainly 80 miles an hour sometimes will actually take down some of those poles and wires. And again, we're not tornado proof. Another data point just to kind of put it in perspective in terms of what we had considered the hardest hit communities. So on the next slide, you're going to see specific information to Evanston, and I'll briefly talk to that as well. 3,400 customers were impacted in Evanston approximately, but you can see some of your surrounding and neighboring communities here and the varied impacts that were destroyed, put into their territories as well. 18,000 in Des Plaines, Elmhurst, so on, and you can see again they're very geographically nested close to Evanston as well. And as I mentioned, out of the 33,000 customers that ComEd has in terms of services on record, we had about 3,418 customers that are impacted. So about 10% of the city of Evanston, at least in the June 21st storm. So comparing that to some of the other percentages you may have saw on the other slide, certainly there were a good impact, maybe not as large as some other areas, but certainly the whole territory was impacted tremendously. Highest concentration, as I mentioned before, and it may be a little hard to read on here. The yellow, I think, is 3,000 to 5,000. Orange, 5,000 to 10. Red is 10,000 to 15. And then you get into some deeper reds that go up to 20,000. And then in what looks to be a brown or black on there, it looks to be greater than 20,000. So this storm was particularly devastating just for the north region in terms of the highest concentration and number of outages I mentioned earlier. So what do we do in this type of method? And I'm going to talk towards the end of this presentation on how we triage this and what gets priority first in terms of restoration, but just the numbers behind how much we intend to staff crews, how ready we are. We open up our command center several hours before any type of storms hit, and we don't know exactly where it's going to hit until it happens. That's a force of nature. We're not sure what kind of damage is going to be caused. In preparation for that, we had, at least in terms of responding to this storm, and sometimes it takes a couple days to build some of these forces when you get outside contractors to help out with assistance or restoration. In total, we used 800 crews over 5 days during this storm week of June to 21st. 440 of those was ComEd crews, 160 contractor crews, 220 tree trimming crews. Certainly we had our management folks on the streets. I know that we had representatives come here to Evanston, some of them in terms of our senior leadership team, our vice presidents. We've been out to your local senator, state senator, and state representative offices. So we're trying to reach out to those communities that were hardest hit and tell them what we're doing in terms of getting people back on. The damage incurred on this particular storm, and these are all preliminary numbers as well. We're still trying to validate all this data, and you can imagine we're trying to keep up with it as it continues to hit our service territory. But some of the high points in there, 79 down poles, 100 transformers, 30 miles of wire and cable that were down just due to this June 21st storm. Now we move into, just as soon as we're getting done with one, we're having another brief blip on the radar in terms of weather again. So on June 30th, service territory-wide, we have 135,000 out, but there's more specific impact in terms of Evanston here. Just kind of comparative data, once again, 94-mile-an-hour winds reported in Waukegan Harbor. Hometown, which is to the south, 60-mile-an-hour winds. And this one, I think if people recall, if you were downtown Evanston here, or if you're on the city of Chicago lakefront at this time, this is the storm that moved in off the lakefront. It came kind of from a north to south direction and east, I guess, so north-southeast, if you will, kind of from the Wisconsin border. Kind of kept on knocking its way into the service territory as it made its way through this area and then eventually out into Indiana. This one maybe not as severe in terms of lightning strokes, only 1,800 recorded, and the majority of them were recorded in the south region at this point. I won't dwell on this particular slide. Again, something from WGN that kind of tells you the story about what was spotted out there. They talk about a water spout that was actually out on Lake Michigan. This is essentially the equivalent of a tornado on the water. And you can see some of the high temperatures that were there. And again, I think, I'm trying to think what other things they had on there in terms of the water level. So I'm just going to move on from that slide at this moment. In terms of devastation, though, now on the June 21st, you were at roughly 3,400 customers that were impacted. This June 30th, while it was less in terms of system-wide damage, Evanston was a little bit more hit in terms of this storm as opposed to the previous one. 4,476 customer interruptions, and we had 4,436 individual customers that were impacted out of the 33,000. So you can see where that ranks in terms of percentage, in terms of outages, and you can see some of the other major municipalities that were hit in this particular storm. And this just recaptures that information once again. And now on to the most and latest storm that we've just continued to battle out of. And I want people to also understand, too, and it's not something that's listed in the presentation, every time that we have a major storm on the system, it also requires us to go back out there and for sometimes several weeks at a time, clear out many of the damage and debris that's still left behind in this storm. And your city foresters can probably go ahead and attest to this as well. Once a storm moves through the area on its initial wave and we start clearing out all the damage, several days after the fact, we'll get what we call hangers, or you'll get trees that are dry and brittle, or you may get things that are just hanging out in there. And that's just talking from a tree perspective, because we do see a lot of power outages that will occur after the fact. But in addition to that, I mentioned just the weeks that sometimes takes us to get back and put things into normal configuration. So our first goal and priority is when we get out to these locations where there's damage, we try and do as much switching as we can to get around some of these areas where there's damage. And that basically gets people back in power quickly and localizes the damage. When you do things like that, we're using alternate feeders. They are tied to the same feeders that serve the customers, and I'll get into the details about what a feeder is if we need to later on. But essentially, if you're a customer and you're served from one line, we may take another line to service you at that point in time. We can't keep that line servicing not only you, but then another customer and adding another customer on that. We can do that on a temporary basis. And that's why weeks after some of these storms, we have to go back and put these things back into configuration. And then again, same thing with the tree fallout. We have to go back out there, field many tickets. I'm sure there's some people in the room here, and even just driving through Evanston, I'm sure there's over 100 tickets probably just in Evanston alone where we still got trees that are hung up in wires. And those are things that we have to address and take them on a critical basis at a time. It may not be causing a power outage right now, but the potential is there for it to cause a power outage. So with that said, let me dig into the July 11 storm. This storm is probably the closest to being a record in the ComEd service territory. We believe the record was 865,000 customers sustained out of power. And that occurred back in July. It was a 2006, Art, I'm sorry, what was the...
1998.
Or 1998, I'm sorry.
Ice storm
Ice storm of 1998, where we had 865,000 customers out of power. So this is probably the second largest storm that we had on record in terms of 850,000 customers that were out of service, and this is service territory wide. Just so you understand, in terms of impact, that's a quarter of our service territory. ComEd service territory, and I didn't give you a good map or depiction of it, but we essentially go, from the city of Chicago border up to the Wisconsin border, obviously to the Indiana border, and as far south as places like Pontiac, Peru, and fairly far south into the state, as well as the western border, almost to the border of Iowa in some cases. So when you consider that you've got that much coverage and you've got that many customers spread out, it's always going to be a multi-day restoration effort when you've got that many. So 3.8 million customers is the amount of customers that we serve. So 850,000, just almost a quarter in terms of damage. Wind gusts again reported 80 miles an hour. Midway Airport clocking in at around 75 miles an hour. And lightning strokes, if you remember from the first slide, we had at about 11,000. This one was 18,000. This was, very fast-moving storms. I mean, the damage it did was super fast, and in almost a blink of an eye in some cases, lasted for about 5 or 10 minutes. But when all that's over, there was just severe damage all over the place. Again, some data points just from the Tribune, just to be consistent, talks about the storm. This one actually showed just, how it cut a swath through not only Illinois, but multi-states. And of course, multi-states had to deal with this as well. Some hit less hard than the ComEd service territory. And certainly we reached out to reciprocity, as you saw, in terms of the complement of the crew counts. We brought crews in as far as Florida, Georgia. We went up our sister company, Philadelphia, PECO. We did Wisconsin, Indiana, Kansas. So about 10 different states in total, and getting those crews in to service this. But again, this was just not localized just to the state of Illinois. This was something that kind of went across the service territory and did considerable amount of damage, but certainly the greatest damage in our service territory, at least the second greatest in all time. Some radar images and some projections, and I'm not sure if everybody can see that necessarily, but I think you get a good idea of the red that's over the area, and certainly in Evanston. Maximum winds at 80 miles an hour. Some data points down here, again, surrounding communities, most of them in the 60 mile an hour range, some in the 40 mile an hour range. And again, minimal rainfall with these, and for places that are low-lying, and I think some residents in Evanston might consider this a low-lying area too, right on the lakefront, and I know some other communities. People were also concerned with flooding, that could be associated with heavy rains that might ensue after this. And fortunately, we did not get, rain of any kind after any of these three storms. So that is one thankful piece in all this, that we did not have those type of rain conditions. So crew staffing for this one, we talked about 850 crews in the previous slide on the previous storm, 1,100 crews. That's the largest amount that I've ever seen, at least in my 13-year career. My boss that's sitting here with me has a 30-year career with ComEd. This is the most we've ever seen in terms of response to a storm in our history. The pictures that you'll see up here, and again, they're very hard to see. Multiple incident command centers were put up across the service territory. This one staged in a parking lot in our far north territory. We had a mobile command vehicle that was out there, and it's hard to see in the picture necessarily, but those are crew trucks that are actually parked in there with contractors working 16 hours on and 8 hours off, and working like that round the clock for the entire week. The details again, 444 ComEd crews, 433 contractor crews, 207 tree trimming crews. The damage on this one was even more extensive. I talked about some of the damage statistics from the June 21st storm. 443 downed or displaced poles, 339 transformers, 77.8 miles of wire and cable used to put back up. So you can see that the magnitude was actually even double that of the June 21st storm. Comparative communities, and again, Evanston is nested in these totals as well. This was the largest impact for Evanston out of the three storms. And in doing so, we also made sure that we had special representation that I'll talk about in a moment as well. But you can see there was over almost 11,000 customers that were interrupted here in Evanston, so almost a third of Evanston was interrupted during this. You can see some of the other numbers that were disturbing as well. In my career as well, I haven't seen a storm like that where 80% of a community is interrupted just based on something coming through like that. 25,000 in Waukegan, probably an all-time record. And again, restating that number just for you on one single slide. I'm not sure if I have to necessarily show all these slides, but sometimes I think it helps in putting the picture in people's minds of what we've got to overcome. And in the storm restoration process, many people don't always understand what goes into it. Some of the storms struck at night, some of the storms struck during the day, and ComEd has to have the ability to go out and patrol the damage that's incurred on the system. When you start at night, it's very difficult to go out and patrol. I'm sure many of you, even just, when your power goes out, probably can't even see into your backyard. ComEd is no different. In the first storm that occurred on June the 21st, we were behind the curve almost by 8 hours as that storm rolled through in the evening, making it very difficult to do damage assessment. That also makes it difficult in communicating information out to customers as well in terms of when power is going to be restored. Those are things that we're always trying to work and mitigate and trying to figure out better ways of getting communication out to customers. In terms of damage, if not driving around your own communities, you could see from some of these slides, you got poles that are broken off, wires down, roads blocked, and certainly public safety incidences that we need to take care of, and we're thankful to the municipality for identifying those and prioritizing those so people can get back to daily life as best they can. Some other pictures of magnitude, you see an RV that's flipped over its side in Burbank. We had power lines catching fire in a tree in Mount Prospect. We have a barn that was knocked over in Loves Park, a pole that's leaning into three-phase primary lines in Rockford, and you can see arcing wires in Calumet Park. This is a depiction, again, of just the service territory and how hard it was hit during that June 11 storm, again with the North Shore being one of the most heavily impacted areas again. But you could see that geographically, this was actually a little bit more widespread storm than the previous. The previous one was really concentrated in the geographic north in terms of June to 21st. So what do? We get into storm mode, and I kind of talked about that a little bit. And when we have some of these communities that are, the hardest hit, where you've got a third, 50%, 80% of your communities out, I'm only one representative, and I serve the community of Evanston, like I talked about earlier. How do we get critical information out to them, especially when I've got multiple points coming in from 20 different communities? The best thing that we do is we take resources from our own company and try and put them what we call boots on the street. So we deployed a special representative that actually was an external affairs manager here in Evanston over 15 years ago. And Alderman Rainey, I think you could attest, you remember Dan. Dan came into service for us. Dan works in our regulatory strategies group, has held many positions throughout the company, and acted as a special liaison to the city to try and get better communication efforts out there. We recognize and realize that many people couldn't get through in terms of the normal customer service lines. There are some tools that we allow the city to utilize and employ on a day-to-day basis, and because of the magnitude of the storm, those tools weren't even able to keep up from an IT perspective in terms of getting out accurate information. So again, what do? We send these people out to the field, and they spent day after day in your community to make sure that the needs of the city was attended to, whether it be clearing traffic intersections, whether it be nursing homes and things that we could prioritize, fire stations, city hall, those critical facilities to the city to keep up and running. Those were the ones that were prioritized first. Dan even took it so far as to go out and actively patrol. When I talked about trying to find damages 8 hours after the storm, Dan actually went out and rode around, I think with possibly Dave, I'm not sure who he went with city staff, but he did ride around, take a look at some of the damage, wrote up those damage requests, and told our crews what they needed to do to get the power back on for certain locations. So that certainly sped up some of the restoration efforts. In addition to that, we also provided updates to the municipality. We held daily conference calls, so city manager and any other staff were able to sit in on those, listen to global messages that we had, ask specific questions in terms of what ComEd was doing in terms of restoration. So those tools and outlets were employed here in Evanston as much as many other communities that we have on the North Shore, as well as our whole service territory. Now this is the very last slide, and then we'll open it up for questions certainly to City Council and whoever else we would like to answer questions from, but we need to take you through what the storm restoration process is. And I mentioned again, first of all, just trying to assess the damage that's on the system itself, but then how do you tackle a storm with 850,000 people out? Some of those could be individual customers where maybe the service wire is ripped off their home. Some of them could be what we call feeder lockouts, where the entire circuit servicing an entire community may be out. That could be 1,000 customers, maybe 2,000 customers. Hospitals, nursing homes, police, fire stations. How do we prioritize this? How do we get traffic signals up? Well, certainly it's a combined effort, the city feeding us information and telling us what's critical. We have to start out and focus on just what those are. What are the critical facilities? And that's important in terms of identifying. So the very first step is really trying to get back the power to our main hub itself. Our transmission lines bring in the power. They bring them into what we call distribution centers within cities, and then from those distribution centers, they go out to what we call the feeders in the neighborhoods. We need to be able to get our transmission lines working, our distribution centers working well before we could even get power back onto their local areas where the feeders are at, where there may be heavy damage on the lines. So we're trying to do that. At the same time, in step 2, we're trying to identify what those critical facilities are. I'm going to ask for Art to lean on them a little bit here, just in terms of the number of hospitals that we maybe had out. I don't know if you remember off the top of your head, how many hospitals did we have out in our service territory during this storm first?
In terms of life safety type of concept, it certainly was in double digits. I don't have the exact numbers here, but in terms of life safety, police, fire, senior homes, and so forth, it was just one of the most significant events that I've seen.
Okay. So with that, we're trying to focus on those first, and then certainly life safety standpoint, live wires down, getting our personnel out there, and we do appreciate the efforts of the police and fire department to be first responders for us, blocking off streets in many cases, cordoning it off with safety tape until we can arrive. And again, I think some people can even do the math, even with 800 crews, 800,000 customers out of power, and probably anywhere on the order of about 8,000 individual tickets to look at. Very hard to get out to every single location at once, and that's why you have to do a prioritization. So to further kind of talk about that triage or prioritization efforts, we have to take a holistic approach and say, what can we do to get the best amount of power or best amount of customers on at the same time as well? So first, responding to those critical facilities, our life safety facilities. Second is trying to get the largest number of customers on as quickly as possible, and that's the goal. So when you get down to an individual customer that has just their service wire down and the rest of the block has power, I'll be very honest, those people are typically the last persons that are restored during a storm. And especially in a storm with 800,000, we know it's going to be multiple days. And that kind of took us through step 3 and 4. So in summary, I think you can see that we certainly had one of the most devastating storms on record. You can see some of the efforts that we've made towards trying to restore customers as quickly as possible. And we try and always improve the communication flow. We recognize it's not always perfect. We do take that information back. We do after-storm follow-up calls internally, as well as taking out inputs from municipalities as well. What worked well, what didn't. So there's always a lesson learned after every storm. And again, anytime we take those lessons back, then we try to employ them so we could do a better job the next time something of this magnitude comes through. With that, I turn it back over to City Manager BOBKIEWICZ.
Madam Mayor, if there's any questions from the council?
Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. DeRay, for coming tonight. I'm glad you're both here. I have 2 questions. One is in ComEd's triage protocol, where do residential areas rank up against business areas? Does that make a difference, the nature of the user?
No, and in terms of when you get into restoration and triage approach, certainly businesses are certainly sometimes intertwined with communities as well, and I recognize there may be certain feeders that only serve residential communities, but you're looking at restoring what we call a feeder lockout first. So if a line is completely down from the station, we're not looking at it in terms of are these business customers or are these residential customers. I'm looking at largest number of customers, period, that we can get back on. So we don't necessarily prioritize a business over a residential. We're looking at it in these major storms in terms of just trying to get the largest number of customers back on as quickly as possible.
On last Monday, knowing that it was going to be a multi-day outage and that I would have limited access to email or computer altogether, I registered for ComEd's text updates for notification about the status of restoration efforts and so forth, but got one message confirming that I had registered for it and then another message saying there was no information to forward. Are you working on improving that service to ComEd customers? Those of us who are without power rely on our phones for information and would be greatly appreciative of text message information.
Yeah, Alderman Grover, that's a great question, and recognizing the fact that thank you for signing up for that service, and while it may not have provided you the best information at that particular time, we know there are certain issues with that particular service too in large storms like that. So sometimes we will actually suppress information at points in time because we don't have good information to give out. Other times, and I have heard this from other communities, as we've also gone out and give similar presentation to some others as well. We did hear early on in the storm that sometimes that information was going out as an auto update as well, where it was giving 2-hour and 4-hour increments. That's something that our customer service department took as feedback from this storm as well, and recognized that they have to do something different in order to get better information out, especially something via those text messages. And it's very hard, of course, for us to go ahead and always establish an accurate estimated time for restoration. I call that an ETR. So we're trying to do our best to figure out what's the best way, what's the best message that we can give those text user up, in terms of an update, especially if we don't have a good handle on what the estimated time will be in that particular community.
I think we'd probably all agree that more information is better.
I
The more
agree.
information you can provide to us, that we could provide to residents, the more we can prepare for a multi-day outage, the more we can give you the benefit of the doubt on what you're doing to restore power. Did you realize that, through having a representative with Director Stoneback in the same room during the last outage, were there benefits to ComEd?
Absolutely. It helped us prioritize and focus on certain things that maybe we weren't aware of in some cases. I think patrolling the circuit in some of the areas, and we can't always have, somebody out there driving along. Sometimes it's better to keep that person in there to get information back and kind of communicate that to constituents, because maybe it's not available, readily to the public via a website or, as you indicated, a text message. But certainly there was definitely benefits derived from getting feedbacks from Alderman and or Dave Stoneback telling us where we should go, take a look at things, see where damage is at, so our representative could actually feed that back into us, and that helped us either prioritize or get crews, because in some cases we might send a first responder, and that first responder may not have the adequate tools or equipment to do that job. So there's multiple disciplines, and I think you might have saw that via the presentation where we talk about crews, and then we had tree crews. If I send necessarily a construction crew out before a tree crew arrives, that construction crew arrives and says, there's nothing I can do at this point because I need to have a tree crew come first. So that's where it's very helpful to get some of that intelligence from from Dave or someone else from the city staff as well. So you're right. It was great to have that cooperative or collaborative efforts, because it sometimes pointed us in a better direction of getting the right resource out there.
Alderman Burrus?
I have actually several multi-pronged questions. The first one is actually not going to be about these isolated storm incidents, but we have an alderman who's not here this evening, from the northwest area, and some of his constituents, their power's out now because of the oversurge. There's a heat problem. What are you going to be doing to actually, now we're talking about special circumstances, but everyday summer usage to make it better for us? So that's my first question.
Okay. Do you want me to answer them in order?
That would be great. Great.
Okay,
Answer that one, and then
Sure.
I'll go on.
So in terms of system planning, and ComEd does system planning for its entire system in terms of feeder loadings and that kind of assessment. When you have a situation like this where we've just come off of a storm, and I don't know exactly that the outage that's being experienced by Alderman Tendem, who's not here right now.
Right.
I can't say or speak to exactly what that is right now without having the good information from me. So to say it's an overload, I really don't know if that's the case. As we talked earlier in this presentation here, we talked about trees falling right now. It could be very well a tree outage. I know that I had several of those today. But in terms of an infrastructure and improvement, I'll even mention the technical review group here that Evanston employs, and we meet with them on a semi-annual basis as well. But on a day-to-day basis, we do monthly reviews for all of our communities in terms of number of outages, and the system is certainly well prepared to handle, certainly the heat that comes on the system. However, when you get into situations like we've just come out of with all these storms and our system may be out of configuration at this point, we've canceled all of our normally scheduled jobs and work for this week. There's just no way to do it, and we're making an attempt to go ahead and get it back into normal system configuration. So if it does appear to be a case where it's overloaded at this point, maybe that is the cause of this particular one tonight, that has to be corrected during this week to get things back to their normal configuration. So I say on a day-to-day basis, I would say reliability in terms of response and in terms of how the system is planned is very well done, and we share that statistics with the city at multiple points in terms of documents for review. We get provided annual accounting to the city twice a year, so that's in place. This is probably an extreme circumstance where we're coming off of a storm, and you still may be seeing additional outages potentially from the heat.
Okay. So my few follow-up questions that are about the storm. You talked a lot about your reaction to that, but not necessarily the proactive. So what did you learn? What do you plan to do differently next time from what you learned? And we talked a lot about what the city did to help you. I think part of the reason why we got our power back on in Evanston is because the city of Evanston stepped up and helped ComEd. Is there anything else we could have done? So just looking forward, these things are going to happen again and again, and we just, every time we can't say, well, oops, someone else's fault, it's nature. Maybe we should plan for that.
Sure, and to the best that we can, we certainly plan for nature events, and by opening up our command centers hours well in advance and having crews standing by ready to respond, and it is very difficult for us to know exactly where a storm is going to hit. As I mentioned, even the one that came in on the 30th came in and just hit the communities on the lakefront. Sometimes storms can take a nasty turn and they can actually go further inland, and we never know where it's at. So from a planning perspective, the best thing we can do is try and get on top of that as quickly as possible. From a collaboration standpoint, I hope that we are working collaboratively, so I hope it's not an undue burden certainly for the city to work with us, because certainly we need your help. There's no doubt about it. We need all kinds of help during a storm, because it is just that. It is something that's out of the ordinary. It's not routine basis. On a day-to-day routine basis, there will probably be no problem in terms of crews responding and shuttling around to various events, but that's where we need your help in terms of prioritization. In terms of things that we've learned already initially from this storm, I think communication is always going to be the one that we always get a little bit of a ding for. And you mentioned earlier about, Alderman Grover mentioned about text messages and that kind of stuff. It's very difficult sometimes to get good information out there, and providing bad information always frustrates customers. So whether that's day-to-day or whether that's during a storm, outage communication information is always something that we could always do a better job on. So I think that certainly, in terms of feedback to the community and what could be done better, at this point I don't know exactly. I think, again, Evanston did a great job in terms of feeding us information. I don't know if there's other things that we could ask of you at this point in time. So if we do have anything that we learn out of our reviews within our own internal discussions, we'd certainly be willing to share that information with you and see how we can partner better in the future on any of these storms.
Comment on that?
Go ahead, Art, I'm sorry.
Just to add on to that, I'm Art Barcima, Director of External Affairs. We have an emergency preparedness department within ComEd, which really helps coordinate storm response and takes a look. And as Eric mentioned, after every major storm, and in particular this one that was so devastating with 850,000 customers, we will conduct a lessons learned within the company, take all the different departments and determine, look at communications, operations, dispatch, supply, all the key functions, and really take a look at what do we need to do different. As Eric identified, and I think was identified earlier, yeah, there were certainly some communications issues as we experienced early on in the storm. When you have this many customers impacted as fast as it came through, lines are just overloaded coming into the call center. Going onto the ComEd website gets overloaded. So it's certainly a stress test for those type of pieces. So those are all things that we'll need to look at as we look forward to the future and our lessons learned.
Are you done, Alderman Burrus? Alderman Rainey.
Eric, in my ward, there was a circuit that was out that affected a lot of people. And we were told a series of things. First of all, we were told that a crew had been, we were out 3 days. Crew had been dispatched, a line crew had been dispatched. And that day passed. Then we were told that the line crew discovered that, I know that you know this, but I want to hear from you
Sure.
how this works.
Mm-hmm.
Then we were told it wasn't a line issue, that it was really, wasn't a line issue. They thought it was a vault issue, underground issue. So an underground crew was sent out, and they found out it wasn't that. And so that was another day. So then they discovered that, and by this time, by Wednesday, we were being told on Sunday we'd be restored. So we were really grateful when we got restored on Wednesday. So then we were told that it really wasn't any of those things. It was really the circuit breaker dealie worked like it was supposed to. It shut down 3 times when it couldn't transfer us to other power source. Mm-hmm. When they figured that out and replaced the circuit or whatever it was that they replaced, the breaker, we got power. Now, what I want to know is, how do you know from the outset what has caused a whole circuit to be out?
Sure. No, that's a great question, Alderman Rainey. And let me explain that for everyone, too. So right now in an analog world, there is only so much automation that we have on our system that can actually tell us where there's a break in a line. And many of this is also predictive type information as well. Everyone in this room today still has to call in a power outage to ComEd, and then based on some of those calls, we have to use predictive information in terms of aggregating your transformer and maybe your neighbors that are there. So by doing that, then we try and get an idea of, where that area is at. Now, it's not to say that we don't have systems that are out on the lines. There are systems that are out on the lines themselves, and we call it remote SCADA monitoring, and they will sometimes be able to tell us between 2 points, possibly from the station to maybe a midpoint on the circuit, or maybe at a particular fuse and or device. Just to give everybody kind of an idea of what a circuit looks like, a circuit can go anywhere between 1 mile and 5 miles long, sometimes even longer, and along that way, we have to break it up what we call as multiple fusing points along the way, and we'll call those devices. So those devices are fuses, much like a circuit breaker in your home. So sometimes from behind the scenes at our operations center, we can actually see it's between this device and this device. Sometimes it's the entire circuit that's out. If the entire circuit is out, they have to actually go out and patrol the entire circuit to determine where is there damage on the line, because they may not be able to know, again, all devices are showing open right now. All the breakers essentially opened. So now they've got to go out and find where that damage has occurred on the line. So going back to your point, Alderman, in terms of the timeline that you experienced too, and I know Alderman Rainey kind of gave you a 3-day chronology there, and I'll try and recap it the best of my recollection of what she asked. So the very first time, you may get a situation where a crew is dispatched, and we gave that information as the best we had at that particular time. Now, when a crew is dispatched, I mentioned earlier in this presentation that you have to work 16 hours on and 8 hours off. Crews will get their tickets in advance in a particular queue within their trucks, and they have what we call a mobile data unit in their trucks. So they're dispatched out based on the tickets of priority, and they continue to work those. If they should run out of time in that work queue, we've given the best information that we could at that particular time, and I can't say if this was your particular case, Alderman, I don't remember exactly, but it's very possible that that crew, even though they were dispatched, never was able to make it out to that job, which they did not have another crew available until the following day just because of the number of crews that were out. Then the second day, as you mentioned, they probably went out with a different crew. That crew was out there patrolling and looking for damage. And they were probably looking at outside the station itself because typically if it's a station breaker, the remote monitoring and SCADA systems would be able to tell us that a station breaker opened and maybe there's damage to that breaker potentially. In this case, they were looking for it outside the station. Short of finding it outside the station, out on the lines where it goes into the neighborhoods where you live, apparently that was a fruitless effort. They didn't find anything that was out there, and ultimately I think it was found that the actual station breaker itself was bad, and then that piece of equipment was replaced on the third day. Did that answer all your questions, Alderman?
No, see, I wasn't really talking about the delay in terms of one crew coming out. What I was talking about was, can't you do anything to determine what the reason for the outage is? That, when I think about this outage, I think of all the losses that took place, and I'm thinking, yes, the outage was an act of God, but the delay in restoration was, incompetence, I know, is the wrong response there, but it's just lack of knowledge on the part of ComEd, or lack of technology, like you say, to determine what's the problem. I mean, if we had known what the problem was, you could have sent a crew out and replaced the breaker, or I don't know if it needed to be repaired. I think it had to be replaced.
Sure.
So, I mean, it just...
No, you're right on point in terms of...
I mean, what is the technology, the SCADA technology, that would allow you to say, psst, these 700 people are out because the breaker locked out.
This particular piece, yeah. So that's an excellent point, Alderman, and you're right on point on that. So as I might have referred to the word analog right now, we're kind of living in an analog world, and that's the same for many utilities throughout the United States right now, and we're trying to make a lot of pushes to get that type of infrastructure investment where you actually have smart fuses and switches that are out on the system, so we could actually tell exactly your point, where is that damage located. In today's world, and I mentioned this kind of, as soon as the storm hits, we actually have to go out there and patrol the circuits. It literally is a backyard approach. So if you've got wires running through your backyard, you'll see operators in our trucks driving down streets to various points and looking at devices and trying to find that and see what's open, what's still closed in. Same thing goes for damage. We have people that are out there patrolling a feeder. That means they're actually walking those lines. So I mentioned anywhere a line between 1 and 5 miles. We physically have people out there walking those lines to try and find out where those damages have occurred, because again, we are limited in terms of the amount of that remote information that we can get that's available from what I call that skated monitoring. So as many utilities, and you'll see some of the bills from, the United States government as well as even internally the state, a lot of people are pushing for more smarter technologies where we can install some of these things out there that would be more automated in a sense where we can actually find and pinpoint that damage, because you're right, it essentially causes a delay, and in some cases it actually defers or sends the wrong amount of crews out there. We don't know if there's, if it's a tree that's down, maybe it's just a fuse, and based on that, if I knew that information right from the get-go, I may be able to deploy the right crew and actually get people restored much more quickly.
One more question. Are there any losses that have been incurred by anybody who suffered an outage that can be compensated for by Commonwealth Edison during any of these 3 storms?
Sure. Let me address that as a whole, and certainly any customer at any time can download a claim form, www.comed.com.
No, but I just want to know, are there any that are compensated?
Sure, and every case has to be individually reviewed, and that actually states it right on the form. I'll tell you there are a number of clauses and exemptions to that are set forth by the Illinois Commerce Commission rules. They are printed on the form. Typically, storm damage, act of God, is not something that's compensatable. If it was something due to negligence, or if there was some type of human error on the part of our company, those would typically be ones that would be something that a claim might be paid out on. But again, just in terms of just an act of God, typically, no, they're not reimbursed. But again, every customer has the right to file one of those claims. We do have a process in place that requires it to be 30 days for review, and then that is also closed out as well. So it doesn't preclude anyone from filing a claim.
So analog technology would not be a reason to be compensated?
Unfortunately not. But thank you, Alderman.
Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. And I understand that ComEd has this smart grid bill, as a lot of people refer to it, pending. And in my review of that information, it seems to me that this is really primarily about providing information and enabling the company to basically reroute power to mitigate the damages. But to me, and this is as much as a customer, perhaps as an alderman, we're still going to have storms, trees are still going to fall down, and things are still going to get broken. So I guess what I'm looking for as a customer, and I think what I'm hearing from my constituents as customers, is that what people are really interested in is seeing advancements and developments in the transmission technology. Because it seems like we have a very antiquated, might be the wrong way to put it, but an old-fashioned way of delivering the electricity to the houses. And that's the kind of thing I'm interested in seeing. And when it comes to the talk of a rate increase or substantial rate increases or things like that getting passed, I'd be willing to pay more if we had real infrastructure improvements. And I understand that the smart grid is an infrastructure improvement, but that doesn't change the way that the power is being delivered. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'd like to see this company, a big global picture. Mm-hmm. But if you could bring that message back home, I think a lot of people would appreciate that.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. And real quick, Alderman Wilson kind of did mention the bill itself, and at a high level, I'm just going to go into 2 components of it. One component of the bill is to provide smart meters, and I'm going to try and tell you where this would benefit customers in the long run. So we talked about the call center and the inability to get through to the call center. A smart meter essentially stops having customers to call in to ComEd. So frustration with trying to reach an operator or talk to a VRU unit, pushing buttons to report that you're out. That's one component of this particular bill. The other part of the bill is really a modernization and upgrade to the system. Power delivery, you're right, Alderman, has been about the same in terms of, 100-year process, and every utility does it similarly in terms of its own distribution build standards. Some of it's overhead, some of it's underground. The bill itself would provide some of that, smart or digital type equipment that's out there. And we're trying to run the numbers here, and I don't want to give any, false information out, but I'll just paint a mental picture for everyone. If we could have avoided maybe, let's say, 100,000 people being out because we had the ability to switch around that much more quickly with some type of smarter devices where maybe just something as a simple fuse being closed back in, that would certainly be a great benefit to the customers. In addition to that, the bill also provides for, the equipment itself that's out on the system. You talk about material condition of poles, wires, transformers. Right now, we go through and we spend on an annual basis approximately $900 million in maintenance annually. And with 3.8 million customers, some might argue that $900 million is certainly not enough to cover the entire service territory. But that money in this bill that we're talking about would provide things to replace poles, wires, transformers, in addition to the smart technologies as well. And then consumer benefits that would be out of there as well. With a smarter meter, you may be able to have the ability to understand your energy better, especially in today's day when you got a hot day out there. I'll be a proponent for just in terms of a smart meter itself. I'm on a real-time pricing rate, and right now, you could pay. You may be able to pay less than what ComEd is during non-peak hours or when it's cooler out. Right now, you may be paying a little bit more, but those are the type of advances that you could see. And also, the bill itself also has some real penalties that are built in for ComEd in terms of performance. So this bill went through several iterations, and I'm sorry to make an advertisement for it at this point, but there's certainly really consumer benefits out of here, and certainly getting people restored in a storm faster is one of those. But it does put back to ComEd certain penalties if we don't meet certain reliability requirements. So we're asking as part of this bill is to actually improve reliability. So going back to some of the previous alderman comments on a day-to-day basis, not just storms, this forces ComEd to actually make sure that the system is operating well and even better than where it is today, and that bill would actually hold us to the fire, so to speak, in terms of financial penalties if we didn't meet certain goals in terms of improving reliability. So I encourage people to go out and take a look at that bill. You can certainly talk to your senators about it. There's a couple websites that are out there to talk about it too. But right now that's sitting on Governor Quinn's desk to be signed or not signed.
I read Crane's about the bill today, and I don't have it with me, but don't you get to drop 9 days that you don't want from the decision as to how you've done? So I don't see that it gives any fair... thank you, ComEd. Here it is. Thank you very much.
Very timely.
But I don't see how that holds your feet to the fire to provide better service.
Sure. There's a number of metrics that are involved in there. I know that 9-day may be one that's advertised in that particular article. And I'm not sure I know all the, the finite points in terms of the 9 days and the exclusions and what's counted and what's not. Some of those may very well be storms, just like this one here. So again, when you look at system reliability as a whole, and I talk to many of the aldermen here as well as the technical review group when we meet all the time, and there has to be certain performance metrics that are measured in two ways. You've got storm, we'll call an all-in performance, where you include your storms as well as part of your response, and then there's the non-storm. And I think even everyone here could probably admit a storm is fairly much out of your control. When trees are falling wires and really doing damage on houses, not only just the utility equipment, you saw hail damage to cars. I mean, that's something that we certainly can't control. So there are definitely two sets of metrics. I don't know if that 9 days, I think that was pretty much a provision set up essentially for those storms, because I think it was looking for an all-in. So when you look at it all-in versus non-storm, I think that's an appropriate, and I can't say if 9 days is the right days, and the governor will need to decide that, but we've already had 3 days here in the last 30 days where we've had storms that impacted at least over 100,000 people, and that's hard to count against us to say, well, your reliability was poor. It was because of storms falling equipment. It's not day-to-day performance. So 9 days, I say, I don't know how to answer that more over than what I just did at this point. But there's certainly other metrics within that bill.
Well, thank you for trying. I guess I'd like to read you what a constituent wrote me. They've lost power 4 times in their neighborhood on Hillside Lane. The latest time was about 2 p.m. yesterday and came back on at 9 p.m. She wants to find out what their neighborhood can do to work with you, you being me and the city and ComEd, to have them evaluate the equipment. There are many neighborhoods in Evanston, this Hillside is one of them, where the power goes out on a regular basis. And so they are concerned, yes, it goes out in a storm, but it also goes out when there isn't a storm. So they would like to know how to get their equipment evaluated so that their neighbors are all fine and they're not. So they'd like to know what they're supposed to do to try to get reliable service. I think they were out 9 days of the last 27.
Sure. And without confirming the information, but I certainly understand your point, and we're willing to work with the city on certainly those types of constituent issues that come up. I would leave it up to the city. I don't want to dictate for you how you want to field that type of a request. Certainly it came directly to you, Mayor, and certainly if you want to share that one with me, I'd be happy to address that one. to the level that the aldermen hear from their constituents as well. I'm sure that's another filter or feeder point that we could actually take a look at those types of situations. And certainly the utilities department, you may have a hand in that as well. So I'm not sure what the right mechanism for you to feed that in from a city's perspective. We would be happy to look at those, what I'll call potential pocket areas if there are some of those. And it's very frustrating because I know residents don't always see what goes in behind the scenes. In the annual accounting that we provide to the city of Evanston, you know, it talks about the actual number of outages and the causes that are out there. Even going from the 2010 annual report, you know, I think about there's a percentage that was underground failures, there's a percentage that's overhead failures, there's a percentage that's animal related, there was a percentage that were trees that made contact, public damage, believe it or not, you know, cranes hitting into equipment, car crashes into equipment. So it's very hard for a customer to understand or know. All they know is they've been out, as you may have, you know, the resident may have told you, you know, whether it be, you know, 4 or 5 or however many times it is, but they may not be seeing exactly what the causes were. And certainly ComEd's willing to work with causal situations where, you know, there is a true, you know, reliability issue, a smoking gun, so to speak. So if the same piece of equipment is failing over and over again, we take that very seriously, and on a monthly basis, we do a review of reliability as a whole in terms of number of customers and number of customers that have seen a number of interruptions, and we look at that to see if there's any patterns in terms of, you know, is it all one particular type of failure, or is it something that's spread out that maybe there are some things that we control and there are some things that are outside of our control. We get inquiries a lot of times, and we might find that it may be a heavily forested area. Maybe you live in an area where there's lots of trees. You know, and that may be the cause of those. And despite our best efforts in terms of tree trimming, you still may have trees that fall on the lines. But a resident may not know what that is, and we'll be happy to look into any individual concerns that are brought forth. But I'll allow the city to make the decision in terms of what's the right filtering point to get that back to ComEd. I don't want to dictate that for you.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights, does anyone have any more questions? Thank you very much. I know you worked very hard to help us get power back, and we appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And Madam Mayor, that concludes comments and presentations.
Thank you. Next is citizen comment, and we have 29 speakers, so you each get 90 seconds. Sorry, but that's... Oh, well, now we actually have 30 speakers. 31. Yes? Oh, 31. Oh, come on down. If someone has, I'm going to read 4 names at a time. You can come up to either microphone. And if someone has already made the points you're about to make, you could just say you agreed with one of the previous speakers. First is Kimberly Gray, Ron Fleckman, Fred Moore, and Jim Walensky. Oh, Jim, your ComEd outages. I should have let you speak before ComEd did. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Kimberly Gray. I am a resident of Evanston and have been for about 16 years. What brought me to Evanston is that I'm a professor at Northwestern. I am a professor in civil and environmental engineering and chemical and biological engineering. I am the director of Northwestern's Institute for Sustainable Practices, and I teach in a number of courses on sustainability and energy. And so I would just like to endorse the wind energy project in general, and highly endorse the recommendations of the Committee on Wind Energy. I hope that, you know, one day we're going to see a wind farm off the offshore in the Great Lakes, where we have some of the highest wind resources in the country. So it's 90 seconds, right? That's what I was
doing. All right.
All right. Well, then on that note.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name is Ron Fleckman, and I'm the president of Citizens Greener Evanston. And I'd like to speak to you tonight in support of the committee's report. There are 3 things that Citizens Greener Evanston would like to ask for specifically. One is to encourage the city to pursue funding through grants for doing wind testing in the lake. 2, encourage the City Council to approve placing a member of the city on the state board that's being in the process of being formed. And 3 is to continue the work that's been taken place over the last 3 or 4 months by the mayor's Wind Farm Committee. I'd also like to correct some of the statements made during the last citizens' comment. In the last council meeting, you got to hear from a handful of residents, mostly in opposition to the committee recommendation. Additionally, a minority report from members of the committee was also read. This is all well and good, and differences of opinion can and should lead to vigorous debate and ultimately to a better informed public. However, one particular comment was made that seemed to get a lot of traction, especially in the press, and that was that a major player, and that major player was supposed to be Northwestern, was opting out. And what I'd like to read is a brief quote from Eugene Sunshine from the university.
It better be brief.
It will be. Northwestern University has a substantial commitment to sustainability and also to working closely with the city of Evanston. We have many accomplishments in the area of sustainability, including the purchase of 30% of our electricity as wind power. And Northwestern would be, and then I'm just kind of going through, Northwestern would be glad to lend our expertise to the process of the Wind Farm Committee. Moving along, I'd like to suggest that we adopt the following as this issue is debated and discussed tonight, something very different. Create an open and respectful forum for discussing different points of view and realities, and have this city council meeting serve as the place people can learn to agree to disagree while being respectful, but most of all, be a place to learn about serious issues.
Ron, I need you to wrap up.
Is that it?
That's
okay.
it.
I'll quit there. Thank you.
Being respectful, then. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, greetings to the mayor, city manager, city council members, as well as all the attendees this evening. My name is Fred Moore, and this is Mr. Oliver Harper. We're with Off-Grid Technologies. For those of you who are not aware, we were one of the respondents of the RFI back in October. And our purpose of being here is actually twofold. First of all, we want to say it's a real pleasure to be surrounded by a body of people who are so serious about our environment and climate improvement. Okay, also on behalf of Off-Grid Technologies, okay, we want to commend the Wind Farm Committee for doing an outstanding and very impressive job with the collection of information that was presented in the last meeting. In regards to comments made last month in favor or against the wind farm, we found each point to be very valid and reason for concerns. It's because of these concerns that we'd like to request to the mayor, city manager, as well as the Wind Farm Committee that Off-Grid Technologies be allowed to give a detailed presentation to the City Council or Wind Farm Committee or both, okay, to address some of the concerns and actually to provide more detailed, concrete information that we feel would really satisfy a lot of the concerns. Just to give you a brief update, okay, right now we're negotiating with a worldwide brand name engineering, planning, and construction firm to support and hopefully finance and partner in our mutual endeavor. This will take probably a month, as the company is a LLC run by a partnership committee.
Mr. Moore, I need you to wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you.
In regards to the economics of offshore wind farm development, yes, current technologies are economically inefficient and unreliable, and that is why we at OGT, as a company, have been working to bring the most cost-effective technologies to the forefront of development. And yes, we do agree with the committee that the technology we presented—
Mr. Moore,
Okay. Well, we would like to respectfully request that we be allowed to provide a more detailed presentation that would really satisfy a lot of the concerns. Thank you for your time. Okay.
James Walensky, 2242 Lincolnwood Drive. Madam Mayor, City Council, City Manager, here to talk about the ComEd outages. I thought we lived on the weakest grid in the city until I heard you just talk about the Hillside grid. We weren't out for 9 days, but we were out on 4 different occasions, and I'm talking about an area bounded by Colfax on the north, Payne on the south, Lincolnwood on the east, and Central Park on the west. The first storm, we were out almost 4 days, and it was rather grating to hear that on the 3rd day that we were still out, ComEd said, well, of the 500,000 people that were out, we've got 400,000 back to service. So it showed where we were in the food chain, if you will. And the second storm, we were all amazed and happy that that was the morning storm, that we didn't lose power. Silly us, though, we lost power at 7 o'clock that night, and for about another 36 hours we were out of service again. Yesterday, beautiful sunny day, 4 o'clock in the afternoon we lose power. It comes back on at 7, goes back out at 7:15, and comes back around 9 o'clock. I thought Enron was out of business with these rolling blackouts that they used to do. But listening to the Commonwealth Edison representatives, the problem is they've deferred maintenance in this community for a quarter of a century at least, okay? And where's all this profit going? It's certainly not going back into the distribution system in this community. And I think that we need to hold their feet to the fire on this whole distribution system. They talk like it's a badge of honor that we had 500,000 people out, now we got 850,000 people out. They should have no people out. Yeah, you had an act of God, you had a couple of storms, but, should whole communities be downtrodden because of a couple of storms?
Jim, I need you to wrap up.
I'm wrapping it up.
Thank you.
And I just want to say that I think Commonwealth Edison in the past used to be responsible to its customers. I think right now it's only responsible to its stockholders. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Olson, Joe Jaskulski, Fred Wittenberg, and Linda Wittenberg.
Hello.
There's a fire?
It was burning.
What's burning?
Oh, it's just a fire. Go ahead and speak.
It's
Okay.
an electrical fire.
Do not be alarmed.
Sorry.
Electrical fire, I trust.
It is, yes.
Okay.
Nothing to worry about.
Are we all right up here?
I smell it. Yes, I see the smoke. Maybe it's coming out of all of them.
Oh, wait. Hold on just a minute, Mr. Olson.
Thank you.
Coming out of all of them. Yeah, it stinks.
It's still down here now.
Yeah.
I just unplugged mine.
Unplug everything. If only we had a wind farm.
And the
machine.
fire chief comes, yay.
That's Greg. Clyber to the rescue.
Should we just throw some water in those plug holes?
It smells, it does smell.
It does smell. Oh, I think I'm having a headache.
It's yeah, I can smell it down here. I didn't see
My
the smoke.
heart.
You want me to get under the desk?
You don't smell any?
Sure we do.
You don't have I can smell. I have allergies, so when I can smell it,
Can you smell it?
Yeah, well, I've been patient all evening.
Meeting's canceled. Mayor, how about a 5-minute recess?
Greg, should we take a 5-minute break? All right, we are taking a 5-minute recess.
Go down, run and get some batteries.
What do you got there?
You got the copy of the reg? Sure.
I want to know the smoke outlet between.
No.
can't work. I have no degree, and I understand the logic of the points they made. How is our marina going to support docking heavy equipment? How expensive would it be to lay electric lines all the way to Skokie? How on the winter storms that we have on Lake Michigan, the damage that it would cause our blades? And then the hazard of repairing to the people who would have to go out there. And there's much, much more. Read the minority report. The burden of the financial decisions we make now will affect the next 7 generations. That's already begun. My husband and I are grandparents and are concerned about our grandchildren's future on a national as well as local level.
I do need you to wrap up.
All right. Our responsibility is to find sound fiscal ways to stabilize our finances without sacrificing things that make Evanston great, such as our libraries and our cultural centers. Remember what was important to you when you were just a citizen. We're counting on you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Tom Cushing, Ed Colgate, Mark Nepper, and Jack Darren.
Good evening. 90 seconds is really short. So I'm going to dispense with some of the formalities. And I'd just like to give you a little bit of background. I worked for 4 years with the Chicago Climate Exchange as a senior vice president there. I'm a committee member with the Midwest Sustainability and Energy Alliance and a number of other organizations that are really focused on the business case for clean development. That's what my interest is. A couple of quick facts and figures. In China last year, there were $50 billion with a B dollars spent in clean energy, in the clean energy sector. And worldwide, excluding the United States, $250 billion spent in the clean energy sector. Germany now has more people employed in the clean energy sector than they do in the automotive sector. Number two, in the next 20 years, in the Midwestern states here, in the region that's called MISO and Western PJM, there will be between 5 and 10 times as much wind energy built as is installed today. There's going to be 5 to 10 times more built in the next 20 years than there is today. And the fact is that the wind energy over Lake Michigan is comparable to the wind energy that you see on those big maps that show the powerful wind from North Dakota down to West Texas. The difference is that the wind power that's in Lake Michigan is a matter of 10, 12, 15 miles from an 8 million person population center. The economics today, as Joe pointed out, they make wind energy offshore very expensive, but things change. Everybody, maybe you might remember a grandparent who was alive in 1900. There was no airline industry. There was no electric power grid around the country. And by the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, things had changed.
I do need you to wrap up.
So I'd urge the City Council to consider staying engaged in this issue, having a representative on the States Committee that's going to decide how this gets played out, because when somebody does develop power in Lake Michigan, the people of Evanston would like to know that they had a part to play in the way the plans were made. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ed Colgate. I am a 20-year resident of the city of Evanston. I'm also a professor of mechanical engineering at Northwestern. I am also the director of the Siegel Design Institute at Northwestern University. I'm here to support further investigation of the wind farm. I believe, as I think everyone here does, that we have a common stake in global climate change and weaning ourselves off of fossil fuels and moving toward renewable energy. We have a responsibility, and I'm very proud to live in a city where we have citizens who have embraced that responsibility and have brought forth this idea of the wind farm. At the Siegel Design Institute, we encourage students to tackle complex problems in a real-world context, and we teach doing that in a variety of ways, but we emphasize a process that embraces the needs of the various stakeholders, and I see that happening here. But we also emphasize a bias for action. And so my message here is simple, and that is that we move forward and embrace the actions that have been proposed by the Mayor's Wind Farm Committee, which will give us new information and help us make better decisions as we see there are many factors that may affect this decision. If we look at the economics today, it may lead us in one direction, but as the previous speaker said, things do in fact change. And let's not forget that we all have this shared responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Napper. I live at 1030 Sheridan Road. And I am a supporter of the wind farm. I've been studying sustainability and alternative energy for most of my adult life, and I really do believe it's the future. And when 15 years ago, and my wife and I, our 4 kids, moved to Evanston, part of the reason was we thought of Evanston as being a forward-looking community with a world-class university. And I think that the flavor that I view Evanston as is a kind of community who would embrace the future, and I see the wind farm as being that, and that we should be open-minded to looking into it further and give it every possibility. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that in less than 90 seconds.
I'll try to beat that. Good evening. My name's Jack Darren. I live at 525 Sherman. I was proud to serve on the Wind Farm Committee. I was here to thank you for that opportunity. Although I bring over 20 years experience in renewable energy and environmental protection from my day job as director of the Sierra Club Illinois chapter, I learned a lot serving on this committee. It was a great committee, a lot of viewpoints recommended, and I do support the report and recommend that you accept and approve it. If you're skeptical about the project, and I know there are lots of questions about it, I would offer 3 reasons to think about. First and foremost, in this fiscal climate, I know that cost is a key issue that you deal with every time you meet as a council. And this keeping the conversation going does not cost the city anything, nor does it commit the city to any future cost. It simply keeps that conversation going. It also does not really say that we disagree with the concerns and the questions that the opponents have raised. There are real questions about cost. There are things we don't know about the lake. But if we cut this conversation short, we're not going to get answers to those questions. And finally, I think that even if you oppose the wind farm, I think that keeping a stake in the conversation, remaining engaged, is the best way for Evanston to control, to the extent it can, what happens off its shoreline. Our ownership as a city stops at the water's edge, and I do believe that there's likely to be a wind farm controlled by someone in Lake Michigan someday, and it's going to be controlled by the state of Illinois, which owns the lake bed. But if Evanston, by virtue of being first, by virtue of our excellent leadership and our relationship with our leaders, remains engaged, I think we have the best chance to make sure that if there is going to be a wind farm in Lake Michigan, that it's done on our terms to the extent possible. So thank you for your leadership. Congratulations on your recent award for all your sustainability efforts, and I think this is
Thank
the
you.
next
I need you to wrap up.
logical step.
Thank you. Next is Joel Freeman, Andrew Irvin. Wow. I can't read the next one. Nicola?
The last name, Dina. I'm good.
Dina Nicola? Mimi Peterson.
Good evening. My name is Joel Freeman. I live at 2151 Hartree. I've lived there for 20 years now this year. I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve on the Wind Farm Committee. In my over 25 years as an engineer, as a professional engineer, this has been one of the more interesting conceptual project reviews that I've been involved with. And there's a myriad of aspects that all have to unfold in order to make something like this work. And until I got on with an intelligent group of people, a group of passionate people, little did I know how much there is to something like this. And in terms of, I want to address just a couple of quick things about costs that I think have been misconstrued. One is that the developer is the one who bears the cost of making things work. And other players can chip in, but it's ultimately the developer's burden. It's not the city's burden. So the city does not have to bear any cost unless it chooses to. The second thing is about the cost of the power generated. We already get power from nuclear power plants, coal-powered plants, natural gas-fired power plants. The electricity we get comes from not any one specific power plant. It comes from a mix. And the default for wind turbine installation is that it will also become part of the mix, unless we go through a very deliberate, very involved, complex process to be the direct purchasers of the wind power electricity. So I want to try and alleviate some of the fears out there this is going to be a financial burden. So continuing the exploration, I think, will help understand that better, and I hope we get to continue that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrew Irwin. I've lived in Evanston for 20 years, and I'm here to talk about something that was brought up earlier, which was intergenerational justice. As someone who will inherit the legacy of the decisions made in this room and in Springfield, I'm here to strongly encourage the continued exploration of a wind farm off our shores. At this point, we are understandably far from figuring out the details of such a large project, but here's what we do know. We know that while offshore wind becomes more feasible by the minute, Norway, Denmark, and Germany are racing ahead to build clean, cost-effective wind farms off their coasts. This has precipitated real growth in their economies, with investment stretching all the way to China. With offshore wind only in its infancy, Evanston is well positioned to attract an international profile from companies, many with North American headquarters in Chicago, wanting to make their mark on the wind industry in Illinois. We also know that despite what we are told, clean coal can never be clean if we continue to blow up mountains in West Virginia. We also know that the promise of nuclear relies on a level of safety that has not been met. Lastly, we know that this council is charged with economic development and carrying out the goals of the Evanston Climate Action Plan. Unfortunately, political leadership here and elsewhere has largely failed at these tasks. With a generation coming up fast behind you, ready to lead in this regard, I hope that for our collective future, especially for those who will inherit the results of your choices, that you act quickly to support the Wind Farm Committee's decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Drina Nicola. I'm going to read a letter from one of the committee members and then have a brief comment of my own. My name is Diego Clabian, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Industrial Engineering and Management Sciences at Northwestern University. Due to travel commitments, I regret not being able to attend in person. 2 months ago, I was delighted to be invited and accepted as a member of the Wind Farm Committee assembled by the Mayor of Evanston. The committee was supposed to evaluate respondents based on the request for information issued by the city. As a committee member, it was a real privilege to exchange ideas and thoughts with other members of the committee and general public of Evanston. For my years of research agenda at Northwestern, for many years, my research agenda at Northwestern has focused around renewable energy, electric vehicles, and other sustainability-related issues. I am very passionate about the environment, and nothing delights me more than outdoor activities in a healthy atmosphere. Like all of us, I also care about money and thus economic benefits and assessments related to these efforts. A potential offshore wind farm in Evanston would definitely be a step in the right direction towards long-term energy sustainability. It is very likely that under the right business model and arrangement, an offshore wind farm would provide financial and economic benefits for Evanston and surrounding communities. It would be a pity abandoning this effort at such an early stage.
I'm sorry, I do need you to wrap up.
Okay, so
You could always give me the letter, and I'd make sure everyone gets a copy.
the last letter, the last paragraph, we could cut off. But personally, I believe that offshore wind development offers something that's extremely valuable for our economy, environment, and national security. It's a source of clean, domestic, and inexhaustible energy. And it's also in close proximity to this large population center.
Thank you. Mimi Peterson.
Good evening. My name is Mimi Peterson. My address is 748 Wesley in Evanston. I just had a few comments regarding the wind farm. As far as I can see from the proposal, there are no economic benefits for Evanston residents in the proposal. By all accounts, the wind energy produced in the lake will be a lot more expensive than wind energy produced in central Illinois. Even with the state's renewable energy mandate, who is going to buy Lake Michigan wind when there's lots of cheaper land-based available wind that is already either built or approved? Why would the City Council want to be on record as advocating for the construction of higher-priced electricity? Whose neighborhood is going to be sacrificed when the high-voltage electric lines are installed to connect from the lakefront grid all the way out to Eden's in Skokie? Will they run down Main Street or Oakton or Church or Central Street? And how are the local businesses and the residents going to be affected along the way? Has anyone confirmed that buying the line is even possible? Given the sewers, the water lines, the deep tunnel infrastructure already buried along the way, not to mention the canal. The city should not make any further financial commitments or devote any more staff time to this project. There are a lot of other ways for Evanston to be green that are easier to do and have a much bigger environmental impact and payback. For example, keeping our urban forest healthy, just to name one. Evanston has more important issues that need to be resolved, and I'd like to see a focus on those. Thank you.
Nikolai Schuspo, Debbie Wexel, Jean Lindwall, and Steve Lavore.
My name is Nikolai Skauspo. I live at 1139 Elmwood. I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve on the mayor's wind farm committee. Just a few points I want to make. Most of them have been made succinctly by previous speakers. Obviously, the question of Northwestern University bowing out on this subject is false. There's substantial interest, and I'm sure that the speakers have well explained that. The second thing that I'd like to point out is that I don't believe we can state that the costs, relative costs, are fixed and immutable. There's no question that the clear expectation of both the European Union and the U.S. Department of Energy is that cost reduction will follow as the offshore wind farm industry matures and develops. This is an entire new industry and supply chain that is being created. There's no question that regardless of fears of this being a declining idea, is proceeding apace in Europe, and they are currently looking at 3,000 megawatts that have been established, another 3,000 megawatts under construction, and 19,000 megawatts fully consented, which means that year after year it is growing. Also want to point out that Illinois is proceeding on this matter. I attended a meeting recently with Representative Gable and representatives of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources who are sufficiently confident of the governor's approval of House Bill 1558 that they are already planning for the first council meeting in September. The three things that the committee recommended and are asking are not something that requires an appropriation of the city. It was simply to put a City of Evanston representative on the state council, continue the commission to address the many unanswered questions that were raised by both opponents and proponents, and to seek and develop partnerships to conduct meteorological and feasibility testing. There's no question at the end it may be subsequently found, a wind farm proposal be found to be environmentally and economically unacceptable, but the question has not been answered. Why on earth in Evanston should we be afraid of the question?
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie Weixel. I live at Evanston Terraces at Central and Bryant Avenue, and I'm not going to talk about the wind farm. I know the least about it, but I'm here about something that's very immediate to me and the 43 owners of property in our complex, and that is parking on the 10th fairway at the Governed Golf Course during the football games. And we've sent you all a letter and a memo about some of the things that we'd like to see in any agreement that is reached to permit that parking in the next season. And we've met with Alderman Grover and Doug Gaynor and the president of the Golf Course Association. I hope we can work something out so that if it goes ahead, we have some protection so the horror stories of the past don't come back to roost in our front yard. And we already have a lot of traffic, noise, and disruption, and we knew it was there when we moved in, but we didn't have the parking. And we'd like to have a voice and a say in how it's managed so that we can come and go and live like normal people on those 6 days. And we're particularly concerned on the night games on what will happen in the dark without lighting and without adequate security and traffic control. So we hope that can be worked out, and we look forward to working with you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Jean Lindwall, 625 Library Place. I just wanted to comment on the process by which consumers get their electricity in Illinois and explain why I don't believe that energy from a Lake Michigan wind farm is likely to, it's not likely to find its way into our electricity mix anytime soon. The Illinois Power Agency was established in 2007 to act as an intermediary for wholesale power sales to Illinois utilities, including ComEd. The IPA solicits bids and determines the lowest cost means of filling each utility's needs. The IPA is also responsible for keeping Illinois utilities in compliance with the state's renewable portfolio standard, which requires that 25% of Illinois electricity comes from renewable sources by 2025. The IPA is tasked with providing sustainable electric service at the lowest cost over time for Illinois consumers. The wind energy that is included in the electricity that ComEd sells to its customers can come from a variety of places, but preference is given to renewable energy from Illinois. Illinois currently produces a significant amount of land-based wind energy at a fraction of the cost than that projected by either RFI respondent. A portion of this land-based wind is already included in our supply of electricity. Because of the mandate to maintain the lowest price for consumers, it's unlikely that anyone would include Lake Michigan wind in their bid because it costs so much more than land-based wind, thus making them a little more non-competitive. That's all I have to say. Just as the source of my information, it comes from a April 2011 report prepared by the Center for Renewable Energy at Illinois State University.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Steve Levon, graduate of ETHS. I have a master's in math and statistics from NIU. I've worked as an actuary for 15 years, a Christian minister for 8 years, and a high school math teacher for 4 years. I'd like to thank the mayor, the city council, and the city manager for seeking ways to put Evanston on a sustainable path, particularly with alternative energy sources. We need alternatives. One alternative is nuclear power. It doesn't pollute the air or water, but the spent nuclear fuel is radioactive and requires special disposal. And in the worst case, as in Japan, radiation leaks can force the evacuation of the area. Another alternative is coal power. The 2 power plants in Chicago right now both burn coal. Their soot causes asthma, their sulfur dioxide acidifies the rain, and their mercury makes our lake trout somewhat toxic. With nuclear power, the worst damage happens when disaster strikes. With coal power, the worst damage happens during normal operations 24 hours a day. A third alternative is wind energy. We can use wind to generate electricity without producing radioactive waste, soot, acid rain, and mercury. My point is this: wind power is worth studying. It is safe and it's clean. Please let the mayor's volunteer committee continue their work. If the high winds can be verified, we might soon have companies lined up at our door asking for a chance to invest their own money to provide us with safe, clean electricity.
Thank you.
And I have some more details that...
All right, thank you very much. We'll make sure everyone gets them. Next, Jeff Smith, Kevin Glenn, Kevin O'Connor, and Lyle Harrison.
Hi, Jeff Smith, 2724 Harrison. This council is considering the next steps following the wind farm committee's presentation. I chaired the Public Affairs Working Group, and I would urge against adopting the null option and effectively killing Evanston's participation and instead continuing the inquiry. I understand people's concerns when there are unanswered questions. What I don't understand is an attitude that says we don't know the answers and we don't want to know the answers. Evanston bowing out of an offshore wind farm exploration wouldn't prevent it from happening because it's a huge energy resource, measurable in gigawatts. It's, to abandon it would be like saying we know there's a huge oil reserve right next door, but we don't even want to know what's there, except here it's inexhaustible and clean. And we can foresee things such as $20 a gallon gasoline that will drive an enormous shift in electric demand not seen. Second, federal policy strongly favors the development and refers to creating this industry. This means that it will happen. It also means that there will be money available, millions of dollars of which we have already let pass by and has gone to other places. It also means that early involvement gives citizens the opportunity to help shape national policies, something we know Evanstonians favor. And every federal study says that state and local leadership will determine this industry. Now is not the time to conclude the inquiry. We're trying to brand ourselves as a green community, a knowledge-based community, and a creative community. Choosing willful ignorance will serve none of these goals. But intelligently exploring and exploiting the possibilities.
Jeff, I'm sorry, I need you to wrap up.
Intelligently exploring the possibilities of offshore wind serves all three. Thank you, and because I knew I only had 90 seconds, I will hand out in greater depth those 3 points that I made. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kevin Glenn. I live at 2119 Sherman. I serve on the city's Environment Board, and I'm also on the Mayor's Wind Farm Committee, and it's my pleasure and honor to serve on both, and thank you both, everyone, for the honor and chance to do so. I also have an undergraduate degree in engineering from Northwestern. I'm a senior executive in a public company here in Chicago. I know fully well the balancing of trying to satisfy Wall Street's quarterly demands with long-term projections. We should keep going on the wind farm. We don't know enough, and the only way we're going to find out if this is really a great idea is to study it some more. And lastly, I'll leave with one other bit of information for y'all. No one's said anything about, and I'm a cold, rational, objective guy, this idea is captivating. You can't help but feel the energy and the emotion on both sides. So I urge you to continue. It's good for everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Kevin O'Connor, 1227 and a half Isabella. A few comments on the packet tonight. Capital Improvement Plan, page 114, fleet capital replacement, amount $1.9 million. The last two budgets, when money was spent on new fleet replacements, there was no decline in fleet maintenance budget. Page 111, Sherman Avenue Public Art, $85,000 from the Washington TIF. That money probably could be rebated to the other taxing bodies, so we don't get tax increases from them. And then curiously, on page 111 also, there's under contingency, it says administrative services for $350,000 under capital improvement plan. And it said the manager was Earl. And so I'm just wondering how that's a capital improvement plan, $350,000 for contingency administrative services. So I think the citizens would like to know that. I know I would in that. So, when we look over all this, I would just say that, when we hear there's a budget gap, some of this, just belies that fact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lyle Harrison, Mercury Wind. I'm the CEO of one of the companies that presented, and our information is on the city website. I was born in Evanston. I went to Evanston Township High School. I have an undergraduate degree in engineering from Kettering University, and I have 3 graduate degrees, one of which is from Thunderbird and MBA in finance. I did want to tell you guys that in the past 9 months, without any cost to the city, Mercury Wind has invited not 1, not 2, but 3 turbine manufacturers to the state of Illinois. The largest turbine manufacturer of offshore wind in the world came to Illinois on Thursday, investigating the possibility, at our request and other people's request, to bring jobs and to provide financing for the wind farm. The second turbine manufacturer that came here 3 months ago offered to finance the entire project. None of the money from this project is coming from the city of Evanston. And I'd also like to answer Joe Jakulski, who said that 22 cents was the rate. That was not in our proposal. We proposed 14 to 18 cents, and the feed-in tariff worldwide is about 17 cents. Now, there are variations. I would encourage the city of Evanston to continue investigating this because there's jobs and because there's opportunity. The question is not, can a wind farm be done? The UK has built wind farms in excess of 7 gigawatts, planning 25 more gigawatts. Scotland as well as Europe. And I don't want to take any more time, but I do want to say thank you, and I urge the City Council to continue investigating because there's a lot of tax revenue, a lot of opportunity, a lot of jobs that the city and the state of Illinois stand to gain, and if they stop this process or stop investigating it, they could lose opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Elliot Zashin, Steve Perkins, Carl Bova, and Nate Kipnis.
I'm Elliot Zashin. I live at 715 Asbury. I've been a resident of Evanston for over 15 years. And you've heard a lot of points about in support of continuing the investigation of the wind farm, with which I'm totally in agreement. I would like to make a few points that I think have been mentioned but haven't been emphasized. The city has not spent a lot of money on this process. A lot of very dedicated Evanstonians have devoted hours and hours of their time at no expense to the city to produce this kind of report, and I'd like to see that kind of effort continued. I think this committee or a similar version of it has to be committed. Secondly, I think this committee was very dispassionate. They were very open-minded. They heard the opponents. They gave them an opportunity for minority report. I don't think there's any evidence that in some way people who have qualms or objections to the wind farm were somehow dissed or not given an opportunity to be heard. This committee was exemplary in the way they proceeded. I think that's very important. I also think it's very important to remember, as people have pointed out, if we don't stay with this, these developments will occur. If we don't take advantage of an opportunity to be on the state board, we're giving away something to another community that will take advantage of it. So I've seen a lot of fears about how the city is going to lose by gaining more information about a very complex project. I don't see any of that. I think this is something we have to go forward with. And the city will have an opportunity, and you, as if you're still in office, will have an opportunity to make decisions when there are costs. But it hasn't happened yet, and we'd be foolish to back off at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Steve Perkins. I live at 1127 Hull Terrace. My day job is the Senior Vice President of the Center for Neighborhood Technology, which has been doing sustainable economic development for 33 years. I want to make just one point here, and that is that the wind farm is not going to materialize anytime soon. This is a future play. We're really positioning ourselves for a possibility. The possibility may or may not materialize. The context of energy and provision is really shifting and shifting a lot more rapidly than we thought. A year ago, it looked like nuclear power was being positioned to expand rapidly again. But in the last year, we've seen the crisis at Fukushima. Japan has now announced that they are going to phase out nuclear power. Angela Merkel extended the life of nuclear power plants by 20 years and now has reversed that, and Germany is phasing out nuclear power. The point is there are enormous changes underway. We don't know what technology, we don't know what pricing is going to be in play in 10 years. this is a great opportunity to be in the game and to provide leadership, which is something Evanston does very well. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Carl Bova, 1322 Rosalie Street. On the wind farm agenda item, I continue to request that the council reject further consideration of the farm. Many of the reasons that I cited last month and those provided to you earlier today form the basis for my position. I would further ask that a decision actually be made tonight to discontinue all the wind farm activities. There appears to be no reason to delay decisions beyond tonight. On the golf course agenda item, I wish to express support for the very same items that Debbie Wexel brought up, and I would like to see the consideration of their requirements within the action by the city. Regarding ComEd, I would ask that the council and staff to work with the utility to develop a program for replacing lines underground and to avoid overhead outages. It is my understanding that the provisions exist within the original old and dated ComEd franchise agreement with the city for just such a underground replacement program. It may be a nominal amount of lineal footage, but it's worth consideration, and perhaps an amendment to the franchise would be in order. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, City Manager, and City Council. I'm Nate Kipnis. I'm at 9507 Central Park. I've lived in Evanston for 18 years. I've had my office here for 17 years, and I'm a lead AP and many other things I won't go into. Wayne Gretzky famously said, "I skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is." The arguments being made against the project seem to assume it would be built right now in this economic condition in 2011. The project would be built at its earliest in 2018 or 2020. We know the price of electricity is going up. We know the price, as many people have stated, of offshore wind has nowhere to go but down. Steve Perkins, I'll elaborate on that, what he just mentioned, that energy policy is not linear. Things can change on a dime. Again, nuclear power was the big thing 6 months ago, and now it's not, and we shouldn't put all of our renewable energy resources in one basket. And there's been talk that Evanston won't directly benefit environmentally from the project. Climate change is a communal problem, and it takes a communal response. Just because I live in a more energy efficient home doesn't mean I get to look up in the sky and see some little blue square get a little bluer. It's a big communal problem, and it requires that kind of a response. A number of people have spoken as if they are members of the Know Nothings, a political group from the 1840s that seemingly is now making its way into current American politics. Everything is okay, just leave it as it is. Well, it's not okay. I strongly recommend that the City Council accept the recommendations of the Mayor's Committee on the Wind Farm, and in particular move ahead with trying to obtain grants for wind testing on the lake, which would bring money to Evanston, push for a seat at the state's Offshore Wind Committee, and continue the work done by the Mayor's Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. The last two speakers are Padma Rao and BK Rao. Oh, I'm sorry, and Trudy Rosenbaum. You'll be after them. Go ahead. Judy, you do have to come up here and sign in.
Madam Mayor, may I concede my time to my mother?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
BK Rao, 2246 Sherman Avenue. A story of two cities with tall trees and great history. Both are known as Tree City, USA. Wilmette has Baha'i Temple. Evanston has Northwestern University. But the similarities end there. On July 11th, when the storm killed a huge ash tree in Wilmette, the village mourned its death. I read a bit more about this illustrious tree. It existed since 1746. In 1976, it was named Bicentennial Ash, and a plaque was installed in front of the tree. On July 11th, residents gathered to say goodbye to their oldest resident. One little girl claimed 2 pieces of her village history, saying she will make something with it and keep it on her door. One woman said, when someone lives among tall trees and sees them every day, it is difficult not to develop attachment. The village president said the village will have something made out of the tree trunk and keep it in the village hall or some other important place. How is Evanston treating its trees and history? Our alderman passed a candle resolution, a re-subdivision revolution without a second thought. 24 tall trees are going to be slaughtered there. Among them is also an ash tree, which is nearly as old as Wilmet's bicentennial ash. Our alderman also passed a senseless alley on Kendall property that could kill kids in traffic before they learn how to spell history. Wilmette earned its name, Tree City. It is living up to its name. Evanston became a joke because our aldermen have no respect for our trees and no connection to our
Please, if
history.
you can't refrain from making personal attacks, you're going to have to stop, so.
It is not a personal attack.
Well, in my view, when I'm chairing the meeting, that
I'm
it
not
is.
saying any individual here. I'm saying our aldermen passed a resolution, which they did. That's what I'm stating.
That's fine,
here.
you can say they
Alderman
passed the
being plural.
resolution.
Alderman is being plural. I said have, not has. Our
Go
Evanston
ahead.
became a joke because our aldermen have no respect for our trees and
Well, that's
no
not
connection to our
fair.
history.
That's absolutely a characterization, and that's not fair.
They passed a resolution, did they not?
To pass the resolution.
And
the
that is
city
what
council-
happened, is it not? That involves tree
does-
killing, is it not?
I'm not going to argue this. It does not mean that this,
It is
that
unethical to
anyone has
pretend.
no respect
It
for
is
trees.
unethical to pretend we are tree city when 24 trees are going to be killed there and for no purpose. Thanks.
Thank you.
I suggest you reread the First Amendment.
Go ahead.
Jenny Rosenbaum, 1133 Judson. I still, regarding the wind farm, I still would like a thorough geological report to make sure that the lake bed is capable of withstanding the pile driving for how many turbines. I don't know how many piles per turbine to make them stand up. I Googled disappearing lakes and found about 8 that disappeared, and I was quite surprised. So just because we've always had the lake, at one time they weren't there, and the glaciers compacted the soils, and I'm afraid of the lines of punctures. I really want to, there's no do-over if we screw it up. That's the main thing. We should be cautious. I've read of other people having wind farms and they're testing with 1 turbine because this is so new. So just be very cautious. If you like any links, I have copies.
Thank you very much. That concludes citizen comments. Next is the Human Services Committee, Frank Govern Memorial Golf Course parking.
Madam Mayor, this is coming from the Human Services Committee. The chair of the Human Services Committee, Alderman Tendam, is out of town this evening. I know this is an issue of import to Alderman Grover. Perhaps given the absence of the chair, it would be appropriate to have Alderman Grover present the item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move approval. Is this a motion or resolution for approval of an extension of 2 years to the parking and tailgating policy at the Evanston-Wilmette Golf Course, the Frank Govern Memorial Golf Course during the 2011 6 Northwestern home games, and I believe 7 2012 Northwestern University home football games. This request includes adding a 4th parking area at the 10th hole and permitting waiver of the alcohol prohibition on the 17th and 18th holes only for 3 hours before game time. The request was approved by the Human Services Committee at their July 6th, 2011 meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing...
The lights may not be working.
Oh, the lights aren't working after the fire. Sorry, guys, you're going to have to... My apologies, Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know very much about the history of parking on the golf course. Could somebody explain to me, is there not enough parking on campus and shuttle buses to adequately serve? And also, I'm assuming that for the days that there's going to be parking on the golf course, people are not going to be playing golf. And how many hours are we losing to folks who might want to be using the golf course?
Mayor, members of the council, city manager, and Clerk Green, wherever you are. I can only go back about 14 years since I've been here, and I know there's a longer history of parking on the golf course, and members of the audience here who have spoken can probably come up and go back further than 14 years. However, several years ago, when the hospital was going to reconstruct the parking garage, they came to the golf course and asked if they could park on the golf course. Northwestern did, because they do place a number of their season ticket holders in that garage. And the city council approved that request for the duration of while that garage was under construction. There were certain conditions that were put forth, and parking was permitted. And for the most part, all of the conditions were met, and I monitored those personally. Following that, the golf course pursued additional parking requests because they saw it as a revenue generating to help the overall golf course operation. It was approved for a 2-year pilot program, and I believe at the time the mayor met with members of the community at the golf course with the golf course board and staff to talk about the issues. It was again approved for a 2-year period. This is a renewal. What's new this time around is Northwestern has come to the city asking if they could use the 17th and 18th holes for their season ticket holders only. They would request that there be tailgating and alcoholic privileges provided on those 2 holes only. The golf course also is interested in not only continuing the 9th hole parking, but adding the 10th hole. The 9th hole and the 10th hole would be under the same conditions that were previously approved by the council, which were no alcohol, no tailgating, 3 hours before, 2 hours after, and it would have the restrooms, security, and cleanup afterward all provided. So it's pretty much a continuation for the 9th hole, new for the 10th hole, and then a new program for the 17th and 18th, all to actually enhance the revenue for the golf course.
And how much revenue is there?
Well, it really is going to be determined between the golf course board and Northwestern University. What we're asking for this evening is just for the city council to approve the golf course to negotiate with Northwestern.
And then can you answer how many hours of playing time would be lost?
Well,
we're talking.
Yeah, as we move, obviously, from September into October and November, there's less and less activity. And the golf course board thought it was more prudent to generate more revenue by parking cars than the number of golfers that would play in those in those Saturdays.
Is there not enough parking available on the Northwestern campus with shuttle buses to?
Well, that's correct. I mean, it's less convenient for the season ticket holders and for the participants. And if you look at the statistics, there's a significant increase over the last couple of years, and it seems to continue to rise in the number of spectators attending the football games.
Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We are experiencing at the stadium much bigger attendance, much bigger, better attendance at the football games, which, as we all know, generate significant ticket tax revenue for the city. For the hours of parking, 4 of the 6 games this year will be in late October or November. And John Lasasso, who's the president of the Golf Association, who was here earlier but had to leave, said that, I think he told us in our meeting last week, that he didn't want to be in the parking business, he wanted to be in the golf business. And unfortunately, on those days, parking makes the Golf Association a lot more money than green fees do. And so for them, the numbers work out better to park the golf course rather than to let people off on the first tee for those days.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to speak to this issue?
Madam Mayor? We did get a really great detailed memo from the Condominium Association, Evanston Terraces. Those are the condominiums at Central and Bryant, which are right at the 10th hole. And we'd be looking to incorporate those comments into a subsequent agreement with the Golf Association or the council's resolution to permit parking, because it's a lot of good stuff that would make it, I think, would minimize the impact on the neighborhood for golfing on this 10th hole.
So are you making a motion to amend it, or you're simply going to deal with it later?
We don't have the actual agreement in front of us tonight, from what I understand, but the comments from the Condominium Association will be incorporated into any agreement between the Golf Association and the city. It's important to me that we do that.
All right. So it's been moved and seconded to allow the increased parking. Alderman Burrus, did you want to speak?
No.
Alderman Rainey.
Will this come back to us?
No, I am told.
No, it's an agreement. It would be an agreement between the Golf Course Association and Northwestern.
No. So I guess my question is, what assurance do we have that the great ideas of the association will be incorporated? I mean,
I know that Mr. Lasasso has indicated the willingness there. Mr. Hurlbut is here from Northwestern Athletics. I don't know if he's familiar with the memo we're speaking with or not. We need to.
You've got to, I'm sorry, you've got to come up to the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brad Hurlbut, Senior Associate Athletic Director at Northwestern, but I think to your point, Wally, that really just addresses the 9th or the 10th hole and not the 17th and 18th holes.
Well, I'm just concerned about the 9th and the 10th hole then. I mean, that the neighbors have.
So, Alderman Rainey, and Mr. Gaynor is the city's representative on the Golf Course Association board. So I think that if the council is agreeable, we will, at Alderman Grover's suggestion, take that memo with us. Mr. Gaynor will take it with him as those issues are negotiated, and we'll ensure that those things happen.
Yes, and I think that Mr. Hurlbut made the point that the letter that came from the homeowners on Bryant at Central referred to the 10th hole. The request for the 17th and 18th hole, parking for Northwestern, the waiver for tailgating and alcoholic beverages, is separate from the letter that we received from the homeowners, the condominium owners on Bryant. So it's really two issues, and we will follow the same restrictions and requirements that we have in the past for the 9th and 10th holes. It's the 17th and 18th holes that would be different.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? All right.
Got a roll call?
I don't know if we need a roll call for parking.
You should. Voice vote. The city clerk is saying you need a roll call.
And here he comes. All right. I would have done it, Rodney, but it's good you're here to the rescue.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Holmes.
Aye.
Alderman Grover.
Aye.
Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Burrus.
I'm not voting. I'm recusing myself.
Okay. Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
6-0. Motion passes. The next special order of business is the review of the Wind Farm Committee report. Catherine, do you want to?
And as Catherine's coming to the microphone, Madam Mayor, members of the council, we'd like to put off item SP3, which is from the Health Department, their E-plan, for another evening. So in the interest of time, we'll put that off for another evening. You have before you, back to SP1, the Wind Farm Committee report. Catherine does have a transmittal memo, which is in your packet. Really, it was just a matter of bringing the item back before the council for direction. Catherine is here to answer any questions, but really we're here to get direction from the council.
Well, if you're here to get direction from the council, I guess I would like to thank everyone who served on the Mayor's Wind Farm Committee, both those pro and anti pursuit of a wind farm, and I strongly suggest that we do go ahead with further exploration of this issue and with having an Evanston representative on the governor's committee. I think it would be a grave mistake to turn down that opportunity. And Alderman Burrus?
I wasn't sure if you got it first, Alderman Wilson.
I'm sorry, I was looking left. I always look left.
That's okay. I would concur. I think a lot of the objections are about what is now, what is immediate, and not what the future is. And we need to look to the future. We need to keep a place at the table. Technology moves quickly. Research moves quickly. We don't know. A year from now, things may look very different on wind technology, on solar technology. But if we're not moving with it, we will get left behind. It's in the research community, there's a lot about innovation and about the notion of from bench to bedside. A lot of people that are, the researchers that are at the bench, they get things wrong maybe the first time, but they don't walk away. They keep at it and they keep at it until they find something that works. And if we walk away from the bench or we walk away from the table, we don't have that opportunity necessarily to come back. So we're a progressive community. We talk about innovation. So I think we need to move forward. I make a motion to move forward and appoint someone to the State Committee on Wind Farm.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint someone to the State Committee. Is that the extent of the motion? And to move forward. All right. Next is Alderman Wilson.
Okay. Has the state committee been formed or created?
The governor hasn't even signed it yet.
Right. That was my understanding.
But it is thought that he will, and
okay.
And if we don't want the position and we're not ready to go, somebody else does.
Okay. Generally speaking, I agree 100% with the philosophy that that led us to solicit the RFI. But from my view, after careful review of the wind farms report and the other large volume of materials that we've received and that individual citizens have received, in my opinion, we don't have a project. There isn't a project before us to approve or not approve. We had responses, but those responses are not currently feasible as we sit here today, if for no other reason than the fact that we have no authority or power to authorize any wind power project in the lake. We don't own the land. We don't have the rights to build something out there. We might as well be talking about building a wind farm in Canada. We simply don't have that authorization or power. To the extent that there's work to be done, and there is work to be done, and it's important work, and that goes to having a representative on the Springfield Committee, that work needs to be done in Springfield. And to me, that's where all of this effort should be directed. People should be working with the legislators to make sure an appropriate policy is developed. We could spend $10 million on studies and research and have the best project in the world on deck, and all Springfield has to do is say, no, we're not going to do that. If they choose not to have wind power in the lake, if the Great Lakes are chosen to be excluded from this, every dollar we would spend would be completely wasted. That would be a futile effort. So until there's actually a procedure and a policy in place from the state, there's no point in us spending any staff time or any money in doing this.
There is no plan for us to spend any money whatsoever on this.
Or staff time. That was my next point. Our staff has plenty to do. We're talking about closing libraries, and we're talking about closing community centers. Not to mention, we have very substantial deferred maintenance. If our staff is going to be doing grant applications, I want them doing grant applications for money to make the improvements to our water plant. I want them doing grant applications for infrastructure improvements, for capital needs, for library programs. That's what our staff should be doing. We have immediate needs, and some of those needs aren't being met presently. We should continue to keep a vision of the future. We shouldn't ignore this. This is something that hopefully will happen, but we don't have the ability to do it yet, and we're putting the cart before the horse. My view is we should accept the report. It's excellent work. Everyone who participated did a fantastic job. I was very impressed with it. And the world at large should know that we are open and amenable to something like this, but we need a project that's tangible. We've done work to get a new ice rink built. We have proposals in response to the request that have a complete package. We have contractor, financing, fully developed projects that can start digging, assuming that we can go ahead and meet the needs assessments and environmental things. So that's worthwhile. We're ready to go on things like that. This is not a project that's ready to go. We're positioned for it. We absolutely should do our best to have somebody participate in Springfield, but not just the one representative. Everyone who's involved and engaged in this needs to be working with the representatives. I've spoken to our state representative about this specific issue already. She does have legislation that's pending before the governor, and that's important legislation. That's going to be setting the parameters for the committee that will develop what we can and can't do. So until we have that set, I agree with the individuals who are concerned about us spending the staff time and possibly the grant money and anything else on something that we don't have the ability to actually move forward with.
Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not interested in participating in a wind farm race. I'm really interested in determining whether or not a wind farm, an offshore wind farm in Evanston is right for us, and through a deliberative process reach that decision. There may come a time when we decide that a offshore wind facility is appropriate or not, but I don't think we're there yet. I need more information, and some critical information for me would be, do we have enough wind? So I'm offering a friendly amendment to Alderman Burrus's motion, which is to also seek grants for funding for wind testing, the meteorological station for obtaining data about the wind energy in our lake. Would you accept the amendment?
We'll accept that amendment.
Is there a second to the? All right. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When we first started talking about this, I had a lot of questions, and I've continued to not only do my own research, but listen very carefully to what everyone has to say. What I'm really struck with and what I can't figure out is why the focus is on a wind farm in the lake. I mean, we're obviously getting a lot of our wind energy from land-based wind farms in central Illinois. Apparently, the state is going to continue to incorporate a renewable energy in its system. And what is so fascinating or so imperative about the lake? I just don't see it. costs 4 to 5 times higher than a land-based wind farm seems to me to be prohibitive. No one has, again, answered how we're going to maintain, how we're going to construct. The citizen who was up tonight talking about her concern about the lake bed, I thought that was an interesting part of this that we haven't heard anything about. Frankly, where we left it the last time when this committee was formed was to look at the 2 specific projects that were in front of us, and the committee was to comment on the viability of those 2 projects, and frankly, that's all. The committee has taken it upon itself to make suggestions as to future steps, and that's fine, I suppose, but that's not what you were asked to do. Some of my concerns that I think I would like to have addressed is that apparently what's being proposed will not really provide any jobs for Evanston residents. It's a project that, as we look at it now, will certainly cause higher utility rates for Evanston consumers from a project that produces energy at, as I mentioned, 4 to 5 times the cost of a land-based wind farm. There will be disruption to neighborhoods from transmission lines and constructions, and I'll bet you a nickel that these lines are not going to go through the Northwestern campus, which will mean the 6th and 7th wards, perhaps the 5th and 2nd ward, and up through the 9th ward to get out to Skokie. There's the major question to me for disturbance and death of migratory waterfowl in the Mississippi Flyway, in which 40% of our migratory birds actually travel down. It's a project with a 20-year lifespan, and this is talking about the maintenance and not the infrastructure, but the actual construction of the turbines. And with a potential during maintenance and construction of polluting our fresh water. It's also a risky project, which no one on our staff has any direct experience, and as you all know, we've been reducing our staff. We'll obviously have to bring on board paid consultants. We'll have to ask more from our current staff, and we'll have to have additional professional and legal staff in order to sort through the myriad agreements that will be necessary to produce a wind farm in the lake. And that why would we do this when clean green energy from wind power is already available at roughly 5 cents per kilowatt rather than 20 cents per kilowatt? Again, that may change down the road, but looking at it right now, I can't see that I can justifiably go to the residents of my ward and say, this is going to be great, these are beautiful wind turbines in the lake, and oh, by the way, you're going to have to pay more for your utility power. And why would we go ahead with a project that's going to create potentially a burdensome debt for Evanston taxpayers? I don't buy into that this will give us some bragging rights, or for some reason this will make us more progressive. I think what I'm proudest of in Evanston is that we're able to look at issues and really approach them thoughtfully. And the position I'm at now is, as being as thoughtful as I can, is to say no to this. So I would encourage my my fellow members of the City Council to vote no to proceed with this. At the last meeting, I did suggest that we put off a decision until the Governor's Committee was formed. I have had an opportunity to also meet with Representative Gable, and I know that there is some concern in Springfield about the viability of opening up the lake to development, and that's what we're doing. We're inviting developers to come into the lake. And I, as a true environmentalist, I have a problem with that, when everything that we're looking to benefit from is available in wind-based energy, which is something I enthusiastically support.
Alderman Burrus.
Thank you. Once again, I want to address Alderman Wilson. I've never considered this about a specific project. It's not about small picture. It's not about the here and now. It's not about what's feasible now. It's about what can be. And that's what we should be thinking about, what can be. We had, I think he's gone now, a 20-something Evanstonian. It's about what it's going to be for his generation and my son's generation, and hopefully your kid's generation, thinking forward. I realize it's very difficult for people that aren't in technology or in the sciences to understand or really conceptualize intangibles. It's very hard. But I ask you to think about keeping the conversation open, keeping the notion of innovation and research. Let's keep talking about it, and not think so small. What I keep hearing from the opponents is, well, we can't do it right now. Well, yeah, no one is saying that we're going to go out and spend money and do it right now. What we're saying is we need to keep talking about it. And, you know, Alderman Fisk is laughing because obviously she's against doing anything innovative. She wants preservation.
Please, Alderman Burrus, please.
Sure. It's about preservation. But what I'm talking about is something different, something bigger than what we just have at this very moment. Think outside the box.
Alderman Wilson. Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Holmes, did you?
Yeah, a long time ago.
I'm very sorry.
That's okay.
Alderman Holmes.
I just wanted to ask about cost because that is the one concern that I had. I'm always concerned when we don't want to discuss the question or the situation, so I have no issue with that. I think that we need to continue to look forward to find out what needs to be going on. But I just want to make sure that we're not spending any extra money, any money that we do not have at this time to spend on any kind of prospecting. And I just wanted to comment that I think that's what our sustainability coordinator is here, is to help us do that. So it's not like we're taking other staff time to invest in, whether it's writing a grant or whatever. So if it would take amending again to make sure that we're not spending any money on the project, then I would, you know, I think it doesn't cost any money for the committee to continue, or if you appoint a new committee. And it certainly would not cost any money to recommend a person to sit on this, the committee in Springfield, I don't think. So where are the costs that we are talking about?
City Manager, did you want to answer that?
Certainly, Alderman Holmes, members of the council. You're correct, Alderman Holmes. I think the most of the cost that we've spent has been Mrs. Hurley's time. I get involved myself from time to time. We did take a van to Indiana to look at a wind farm, so that was probably the most direct cost that we've spent through this process. We have no additional dollars other than Mrs. Hurley's salary currently available to do this. I think one of the concerns I have, of course, is that for a city that values sustainability and green practices, we have one staff person. And so while she is extraordinarily talented, and we're very lucky to have her, there's only so many hours in the day and the week. And as you heard, we have a very ambitious recycling event happening this Saturday, which she's also involved in, lots of other initiatives, and it really just becomes a matter of priorities. So, you know, certainly if it's the council's desire for us to continue moving forward with this project, we would, Mrs. Hurley and I would work together to sort through what's appropriate as far as staff time. You have existing boards and commissions that deal with energy, utility, sustainability issues. My sense is that Mrs. Hurley is already involved in those groups, would continue to be talking with them, but there's no other direct cost that we would have available to put toward this other than staff time.
Okay, Alderman Grover, then Alderman Wilson, then Alderman Rainey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I think I've got them all.
People ask me all the time whether I'm for or against the wind farm, and I tell them I don't know yet. I just don't have enough information about whether this is a risky venture, whether it will fail to produce jobs, whether it will produce unaffordable energy rates, whether the lines will be placed through certain wards as currently configured. I just don't know. And I think that kind of makes everything kind of speculative, and it's our duty to go get more information. And we take tiny baby steps to get that information. The 2 steps tonight in the motion are to ask for an appointment of someone from the City of Evanston to the State Council and to see if we can generate some grant money for a meteorological station in Lake Michigan. Those are the 2 next baby steps, and if we can do that tonight, we've just taken baby steps. We haven't decided to wholesale adopt a wind facility in Lake Michigan.
Alderman Wilson.
First of all, I don't have any trouble conceptualizing things or understanding scientific principles. And we received a lot of good and helpful information that I understood. And as Alderman Fisk mentioned, we don't have a specific project in front of us. We have limited staff time, and we have a lot of things that we could be doing now. We have to address the here and now today. Why is it that countries in Europe landfill half of their waste, less than half of their waste? Why do we send so much stuff to the landfill? These are the kinds of things that our staff could be working on today. What can we do to reduce our landfill deposits by 20, 30%? In the 2000s, I was looking at the research, England went from recycling something like 7% to 25% or so of their waste in a short period of time. These are the kinds of things we can be doing right now, which don't require ripping up a big path through the city or research or anything else. These are things that our staff could be devoting themselves to today, tomorrow, and having a positive impact immediately. And like I said, we should be open to anyone who wants to come to us and present something. But on the other hand, we don't have that right now. And as for the wind farm, against the wind farm, I'm not against wind power. I'm not against it at all. But I didn't receive a package that I can look at and say, yes, this is realistic to go forward with, whether it's today or tomorrow or 5 years from now. Technology might change. One of the proposals had an interesting and unique technology, but that's not something that we can start. So as it evolves and develops, then we can address it again as it comes up in the future.
Alderman Rainey.
Well, I think I would agree with most everything Judy Fisk said if we were working on a project today, but we're not. So none of that really is factual for when a wind farm might or might not be possible. So I think Steve Perkins said it best, and several people here have remarked on his comments, and that is we're not talking about maybe not even this generation. I mean, I don't think anybody has any idea when something like this might be able to happen. I agree completely with Alderman Holmes. And for Alderman Wilson, we are working on reducing our landfill waste. We've been working on it for years. That we haven't been as successful as some European country might be the case, but that's not to say that we are not working on it. Catherine gave a whole report tonight on recycling over the weekend, how we're going to work on that. So, I mean, that just wasn't a fair statement. I was going to nominate Catherine to be on the the state committee, but now I don't think I want to take her out of town to do that. But I think if we all just sit back for a minute and reread the recommendations to the city for next steps, there is nothing threatening there. There is nothing really of any financial nature. I believe that the geological station might even be financed by somebody interested in pursuing a project in Evanston. I mean, I certainly would not support paying 1 penny for that. So either a grant, which we always end up having to support in some financial way, or some corporate sponsor for doing that. So I didn't feel comfortable with this prior to the discussion, but one of the people I've relied on over the years is my dear constituent, Steve Perkins, and I always figure if he thinks it's okay with me, because he's so much smarter than I am and has such a handle on this kind of thing and has devoted his life, really, to these kinds of matters. So I'm going to support going forward with the recommendations to the city for next steps that came from the Wind Farm Committee. And a very strong support for the idea, and I really, instead of a grant, I would really make it known to the community, the corporate community that does wind farms, these guys that were here tonight. Let's see who can come up with that. I have no idea how much that costs. Do you? No idea. No. Does anybody else have any idea? Catherine, do you know how much the stations to determine when would cost?
It's not cheap, but that'll be something that we have lots of people who
But I mean,
could
is
look
it
into.
$10 million or $1 million? I mean, do we know?
Probably depends on how large it is.
Somebody knows?
Someone from the-
1 million?
It's probably somewhere in between there.
All right, we got a couple, I can see it now. All right, because there's no point going forward if the wind doesn't, meet the requirements. So I call the question after all that. Is there anybody else on the list?
Alderman Burrus.
I take it back. You could call the question.
I was just going to say.
I'm sorry, did you call the question?
Sorry. I'm just going to say, when we're talking about grants and corporate sponsors, what I heard from the Wind Farm Committee today was call on us some more. We want to be here to help. So that might be something to go back to them and say, okay, here are some grants. If other aldermen are so concerned about Ms. Hurley's time, which is very valuable, I bet that the committee, if we see nods from the committee that would help out on this, that may be a way to go.
I would think we could appoint someone from the committee. All right, city.
Wait. Well, everything we're saying tonight, we're saying to the Wind Farm Committee, are we not?
Yeah.
I mean, that was my impression.
Yeah, right,
Yes,
yeah.
okay.
City Clerk, it's been moved and seconded that we proceed to move forward on the wind farm and seek grants or corporate sponsorship for a meteorological study of wind.
Alderman Wilson.
No.
Alderman Holmes.
Yes.
Alderman Grover.
Yes.
Alderman Rainey.
Yes.
Alderman Burrus.
Yes.
Alderman Fisk.
No.
Alderman Braithwaite. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 2.
5 to 2, the motion passes. Next is the fiscal year 2011 financial reports and budget amendments.
Actually, Madam Mayor, we'd like to go to
Oh,
SP2.
sorry, NSP2. I drew a line through the wrong thing. I do apologize, Joey.
As you know, Madam Mayor, members of the council, we're at a new stage of the NSP2 program where we have identified properties, we have purchased properties, we have renovated properties. Now comes the happy task of actually looking to sell the properties. Jolene Saul from our Community and Economic Development Department, who has really been the leader of our band with NSP2, is here this evening to give you an update on the program and specifically to talk about the new phase of the for sale of the properties involved in the project. Jolene, good evening.
Good night. As the city manager mentioned, we're really excited about the point that we're at the program. We expect that the first properties will be ready for marketing, actually both for sale and for rent, starting next month. But before I leap into the marketing piece, I just want to give a brief update of where we are at the program. So to date, it's an $18 million grant, and we've spent approximately 1/3 of the funds, so $5.7 million. In terms of acquisition, we have a goal of acquiring and renovating 100 units of housing, and we're at 62 units. One property is actually complete. There's an additional 9 properties that have either started abatement for lead, asbestos, and mold, or rehab. There'll be 9 condo units that the contracts for those should be awarded soon for rehab. So within a month or two, we should have about a quarter of our units either completed or under rehab. In terms of contracting, we do have a goal that a minimum of 25% of the contracts will be awarded to either minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, or Evanston-based businesses. To date, on the rehab work, we have awarded $1.6 million in subcontracts, and of those, 46% have gone to minority businesses, 36% to women businesses, 73% to Evanston-based businesses, and we also have the additional goal of awarding 10% of the contracts to what HUD calls Section 3 businesses, so they're either owned by low-income residents or have a percentage of employees that are low income. And we have awarded 41% of subcontracts to Section 3 businesses. So on all fronts, we've exceeded our goals, and we're very proud of where we are to date. So in terms of marketing, and we will focus on the for sale piece. We do have rental properties, but the process for sale is more complicated than renting. So it's very important that we get out there early and quick and make sure that we're building up a pipeline of eligible buyers. So this presentation will focus on the for sale piece. The marketing team consists of Brinshaw Development, which is the city's development partner in the NSP2 effort, American Marketing Services, which is working on the marketing campaign, Coldwell Banker, we'll be using the downtown office as the listing agents for the NSP2 homes, Housing Opportunity Development Corporation, they will be the home buyer counseling agency. There's a requirement that all home buyers complete 8 hours of home buyer counseling. So they'll be providing that counseling, and of course, the city of Evanston. The theme of the marketing campaign is Live Evanston, and it really stresses, one, the unique opportunity that NSP offers. These are like new homes that will be offered at affordable prices, and they're in Evanston, a very desirable community. So it's a unique but limited opportunity for people to take advantage of. And through the campaign, the goal is to develop awareness and generate purchase leads from income-eligible households. So we have, as I stated before, 2 homes that should be available next month, and over the next 3 to 4 months, about 25 units coming to market. And we'll be using a variety of media to convey the message and to make sure that people know about the program that's being offered. So we have a website, newspaper will have ads both in print and online, transit ads, streetlight banners, and yard signs, and I'll go through the creative for each of these. So the website was launched, we did a soft launch late last month, so we sent out the link, and it's www.liveevanston.net. We sent out the link to approximately, I think it was 120 people who had expressed interest in renting or buying through the program. Right now, there's just the for sale piece, but we will be adding a rental component soon. So we just have some screenshots of the website. So there's just an overview of the program. As we have properties that are available, there'll be featured listings on the main page, a program description that goes through the specific requirements of the program, from income, down payment, and home buyer counseling. The steps to buying a home through the program, we wanted to make it very simple, so there's 5 simple steps. The incentives that are being offered through the program, so the city will be offering soft second mortgages to make these properties more available. So this just describes how that piece works. As properties become available, they'll be listed on the website, and then people can click individual properties to learn more about them. And because a huge selling point of these homes is Evanston, we want to highlight the resources and amenities that Evanston has to offer. So there are links to various institutions in the city so people can learn more about the community. And then just a basic contact page. We do have, in addition to the sales agents and the counseling agencies, we have established relationships with 4 lenders, 1 national, 3 local, who have committed to working with our buyers. As many of you know, obtaining financing in this market is difficult. So these lenders understand how our program works, and hopefully we'll be able to work with our potential home buyers. Through the website, people can register for the program. There's two ways. There's a PDF that they can download and then mail in, and there's also an online form that can fill out, and it comes straight to my email inbox, and we can process applications that way. We also plan to have newspaper ads starting at the end of this month, and this is just an example of one of the ads that would run in print. We plan to have transit ads in two forms. We'll have ads on train platforms, and right now the stations that are planned are Howard, South, and Davis. And that's just another platform ad, as well as advertisements on the sides of buses. And they'll be on CTA and PACE buses in the local area. And as you can see, the theme, the Live Evanston theme is strong, so they look very similar. We also would like to have street light banners throughout the neighborhoods, and not just in the NSP2 target areas, but also on main arterials in the city, so that not just people who live in Evanston, but people who work and are traveling in and out of Evanston learn about the programs.
Excuse me a minute, Ann. Alderman Rainey, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, I see this banner has, I can't tell, I guess they're Caucasian, but I'm just concerned that our banners and our advertisements are diverse. And I'd like to also know, why aren't there going to be any notifications or any advertising on the Central Street platforms or North Evanston platforms? You know, I mean, just because most of the homes, or all of the homes, are in the 2nd and the 8th Ward, doesn't mean that there might not be people in more affluent wards that could use this housing also.
We do have...
Let's spread it around.
We do have representatives from the marketing firm here, so I would...
But I'm not, I want you,
Yes.
you're our staff person.
Correct.
Please, tell the marketing firm, make the ads very diverse. Appeal to white people, to Hispanics, to African Americans, to Asians, to everybody. No, let's not, let's not also just focus it on the south end of town. Let's spread it all around, all the ads all around. Also, I was wondering, in the rental housing, are we going to subsidize the rents by virtue of the NSP2 funds, or are we going to also accept housing vouchers?
The rents will not be subsidized. They'll be set. They do have to be affordable to certain income levels,
Right.
but they won't be subsidized, so it'll be the tenant's responsibility to pay the rent.
No, but because we're renovating them and purchasing them with government funds, that in itself makes the project subsidized. And I don't mean that in terms of the tenant bringing the subsidy, but the owner-developer is subsidized to do this work. So are we, just answer this one question, are we going to be accepting housing vouchers for rent?
Yes.
We are. Yeah. And why did we choose Housing Opportunity Development Corporation to be our housing counselor?
The first requirement of a counseling agency is that they're HUD certified. There are a few other agencies that are HUD certified, but I think one of the advantages of using HODC is we are also focusing on employer-assisted housing, and HODC is one of the few counseling agencies that are authorized by the state to facilitate that program.
Yeah, well, they sure haven't done so good with their 8th Ward properties, so that's what concerns me. I mean, we just had an eviction on one of their properties, so I just hope that more than is there going to be like, let's say, a community vetting process or anything for tenants?
There's a screening process that Brinsure, as the property owner, will be undertaking for all
But the
its
neighbors
tenants.
are locked out in the process, is that right? I think it would be
I
interesting to have,
yeah, I didn't say
to
they
have
were.
an advisory committee of neighbors on this. I think you should think about that.
I'll make a note of it. So the banners, there are actually 3 that will be in succession. So this would be one of them, stressing the affordable homes that are beautifully renovated. And then it will point people to the website so that they can learn more information about the program.
Is that an actual home that we've renovated?
That is not.
See, I think if you're going to have these banners, let's have truth in advertising. Put something that we've actually done.
Well, I guess it's partly a timing issue. We want to get the word out before the homes are available, so we have a pipeline of buyers. So by the time...
Wait a minute. Excuse me, Julie. Alderman Grover, did you have... Alderman Rainey, are you done? Yeah. Alderman Grover, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick one. Thank you, Madam Mayor. It appears that there was no advantage to this marketing effort by being overt about the fact that it's a City of Evanston initiative, because it doesn't look like the city's logo is anywhere. Was that a determination of the marketing group, is not to mention City of Evanston in the marketing?
Yes.
And can you share with us maybe the reason why it didn't help?
Perhaps AMS could talk to, AMS has experience marketing affordable programs and has done this for the city, so perhaps they can speak to that fact. But I think there is sometimes a stigma associated with city or publicly financed housing. American Marketing Services. They're based in Chicago.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. We will also have yard signs on individual properties, and it has the same Live Evanston theme with the listing agent and the website, so people can look at individual property listings. In addition to the Live Evanston marketing campaign, we will send out postcards to targeted households within Evanston and select Chicago and suburban zip codes. We'll have brochures, which was included in the council packet. We'll link to the website through the city's website. Continue to disseminate information through the City of Evanston's e-newsletters. Continue to meet to participate in ward and community meetings, religious congregations, and any other outreach opportunities that exist. And we will have materials that are tailored for Evanston employers. And each property will have its own property-specific listing. So Coldwell will have newspaper ads, website listings, MLS, and brochure and data sheets. And so now I'll open it up for any additional questions.
Do you know how many people are pre-certified to buy these?
We haven't done, in the registration process, our initial screening tool is self-reported income.
Mm-hmm.
So we have received approximately 30 registration forms since we notified people of the website. And of those, I would say most qualified. I would say about 25 people have qualified based on self-reported income.
Thank you. Alderman Burrus?
I'm not a marketing person, but it seems the marketing is looking external versus internal. And I thought part of the purpose of the program, which I think is fabulous, is to help people within the community stay in the community and financially be able to afford to buy a home or to continue to rent here. We hear a lot about people doubling up in homes or sleeping on people's couches, that kind of thing, where we're trying to help people here. And I just, from the marketing, it just seems that we're marketing outside and not trying to bring more people into Evanston, which is great, but not necessarily helping the people that are already here. And maybe I just don't understand the marketing piece.
All right, we are doing both. So the print ads will be in local papers such as the Evanston Review, the Round Table, and the Sentinel. So I think I know it's focused at both within Evanston and outside as well.
I
I guess, I'm not talking about where it's placed, but how it says Live Evanston. It's kind of like, go to Michigan to do, summer vacation. It's more of trying to promote Evanston externally versus you're already here and how do you stay here? How can we help you remain in the community and versus leaving the community because you can't afford to be here. So I just think it's a bit nuanced, maybe.
Alderman Rainey.
It would seem to me in Evanston there's got to be marketing firms or marketing businesses, maybe not big firms. And I just don't know, why did we have to go to Chicago to get a marketing company to market this?
AMS does have experience marketing city programs, subsidized programs, and I think it's a different market than market rate programs.
I couldn't disagree more. I think an Evanston firm would be smart enough to market this program. I don't think a whole lot of people have a whole lot of experience marketing NSP2 because it's a new program. I mean, it hasn't been around for 10, 15 years. So I think, I just wish we had all known some of this. I mean, we had the hugest battle about hiring Evanston contractors. And now we hear that some, I mean, I find I do not appreciate any of that advertising. I don't like it.
Alderman Holmes?
I just wanted to go back to the number of people. You mentioned 30 people registered, but don't you have over 100 people signed up on in the interest of the NSP2 program?
So that list was a mix of people who are interested in rental and for sale.
Absolutely.
So that's part of it. And then to date, just not everyone has.
Right, I know, but those are Evanston residents. That's what I was. That's the
They're
point I'm
largely.
trying-
They're not entirely, but they're largely Evanston residents. Yes.
The 100 are mainly Evanston?
Yes.
Terrific. Alderman Braithwaite.
That was the question I was going to ask, exactly how many folks are on the wait list, and out of that
Right.
percentage, how many numbers are actually from Evanston?
So I have another question then. What are we going to do to help them get HUD certified?
To qualify for the housing, it's really based on their income is the first test. So I don't know.
Well, they have to fill out a form or something, right?
Well, there's the initial registration form, but as they move through the process, there will be a more rigorous income certification process that's dependent on, we'll be using the tax returns from households. And so that's all HUD mandated, and they have to fall within the requirements set by HUD.
Okay, we have no plans to help them fill out the forms or anything?
To fill out the forms? Yes. People stop by my office on a regular basis.
All right.
I've registered people.
Perfect.
Madam Mayor.
Alderman Rainey.
In order to qualify to purchase one of these homes, they have to qualify for a traditional mortgage. I mean, that's what they have to do. So I would imagine that they'll probably be able to fill out the form.
Hopefully. Okay, anybody else?
It takes, I hope so. I mean, well, the problem we're replacing a problem where people lost their jobs and couldn't make it in their homes. So we want to make sure that we replace those people with people who can. So one of the interesting parts about this is while we're going to make the homes affordable, people do have to qualify for a conventional mortgage.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No one else is waving at me since we have no lights. Thank you very much. You've done a great job. All right, City Manager. Next is fiscal year 2011 financial reports and budget amendments.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, it is now 10:33. We still have an executive session to go. I would like Mr. Lyons to go through his presentations. There's a very complete staff report which has been provided. So, Mr. Lyons, if you could perhaps pick some highlights. We do have 2 resolutions before the council, which we would like your action on this evening. But what we would like to do is try to condense, Mr. Lyons, the presentations to sort of hit the highlights. The highlights are that we ended the fiscal year in fairly good shape. We're doing okay in the current year with some challenges, and then we also have the budget calendar. So, Marty, perhaps if you can amplify those couple of points and then address the resolutions, and then we can open up for questions.
Good evening. I'm Marty Lyons, Assistant City Manager, Madam Mayor, members of council, Clerk Green, Mr. BOBKIEWICZ. You did a very nice high-level summary there. What we have in the presentation that I do not have to walk through line by line, and you have them at your desk, is that, yes, in fact, part of our presentation is about the general fund, and the rest is about other funds. So the general fund did come in very close to budget on both the revenue and expense side. We're very happy, especially in some of the economic indicators on the revenue side, that our sales tax was close to budget. Our income tax was actually slightly above budget, given all of the worries about that. So it was a very good performance. We're certainly not saying we're on an upswing. We just know that it was a fairly stable performance. And then when you add in the sale of the WALLY property, that puts us into a surplus for the year. So again, I don't need to go through each one of these. One of the ones that was such a terrible one, real estate transfer taxes at $200,000 above budget. Far cry from our $3.3 million or so, almost up to $4 million 4 or 5 years ago, but still coming back. One of the things that I'll get to in the second presentation is building permits, but they did come in above budget substantially. Helped us out quite a bit, whereas utility taxes, because of the historic low natural gas prices, came in substantially under budget. So total revenue came in $88.5 million or $1.6 million above budget. Take out the WALLY, and we're about $300,000 under budget. So 2 to 3 tenths, well, about 0.4% off. That's in these economic times, I'm very happy with our budget team for their projections. Yes, we went up and down on a few of the revenue sources, but overall very close. On the expenditure side, we're about 0.5 point over budget. And for the most part, that is all personnel related. We had, as a part of our contracts, we have a variety of comp time, sick time, vacation time payouts, and we do also, we've had a lot of extra activity in police and fire, so there was a little bit on the overtime side, but for the most part, it's all in personnel in our main services of police and fire. And then the one item in administrative services was something that we had projected that was going to be a concern, and that is unemployment compensation. So a lot of that has worked its way through the system. I just looked at a quarterly report today for unemployment that is down substantially. So one of the things I want to show right here is that in the general fund, if you're going to look at our audit in about a month or so, you will see the numbers $6.9 million higher, and that is because the IMRF bonds were included as a pass-through. So they elevate the general fund numbers on both the revenue and the expense side. Bond proceeds in, immediate payment out to IMRF, but for comparing to our actual budget to see how we did, we excluded it from the discussion. So at $14.7 million, that is our undesignated, unrestricted fund balance. You'll see it quite often closer to $20 million because that includes our reserve for IMRF and the reserve for compensated absences. That is also discretionary money on the council's part, but it is designated. So other funds, Economic Development Fund, one of the things that I want to get to, also point out in other funds, you'll see unfavorable variances on the revenue side and favorable variances on the expense side, meaning we realized we weren't going to get the revenues in, and expenses also didn't come in, so the net effect to fund balances in most of our funds was neutral. So Economic Development Fund maintained its fund balance year over year, actually added a little bit to it. Our TIF funds, this was one of the big hits, the reassessments. If you look, Washington National held its own, but every other fund, they were all taking hits on the assessed value, and that's what caused the lower tax increment. We expect that to then start going back up again, and we have the Economic Development Committee is going to be looking at our TIFs at the next meeting, and then we'll be coming back to council. The Fleet Fund came in better because of Northwestern University's contribution for the 539 is the fire engine, and then the $600,000 is the federal grant for the fire truck, and then the CIP fund is the remainder of the fire truck through bond proceeds. Let's see here. On this one, capital improvements, that references us being behind. We adopted the capital improvements fund in June of last year, so there was not a great chance for all of those projects to be completed. So we delayed our bonds all the way until June this year, or July this year. We just went out for bonds, and that just means we've been holding back on the projects, and that helps reduce our debt overall. Parking fund, we did have lower than expected collections. We also had, when you see the revenue side, the expense side, we have lower than expected expenses. Again, the parking fund maintained its fund balance. Water fund, the same thing. We did not issue debt. We didn't need to. So that held on all the way until right now. As you saw in the bond proceeds from 2 weeks ago, we issued approximately $3.4 million in debt. And then the sewer fund, that is more of the same of our, during last summer, it was lower usage. So even though we decreased revenues, we still didn't make that revenue projection. So on the expense side, as I noted, we will have on the motor fuel tax, that was very favorable bids last year in all of our projects. The E911 fund, that is just a delay of the project. I think the bids are a little bit better than expected, but we're still finishing up the E911 center. On the Economic Development Fund, with nothing going on in the economy, we did not have that much in the way of the need for development funds, and that's where we do have substantial dollars budgeted in the Economic Development Fund. And then in the case of Howard Ridge, that was the purchase of property that was not budgeted, but we had sufficient reserves for it. Oh, darn, I've changed that red thing 3 times, and it still keeps popping up there. There is no reason for the red, so that was just one that I was looking at earlier. In the Capital Improvements Fund, again, as I noted, that's just a delay in projects. We have had some better bid pricing, but for the most part, those are projects being pushed out and not bid in until late summer, so they've been carried over. Special Assessment Fund, the alleys were less than anticipated, and again, parking I referenced. The SCADA and the 1965 filter projects were the big projects for the water fund that were deferred, and we've just brought them to council recently, so those are in this year. That's why you have the lower expenditure in the water fund. So the sewer fund has to do with the debt situation. So we had anticipated from the August report a certain amount of debt. The favorable variance in expenditures has to do with we're trying to give the council a look at the unaudited final numbers. Well, debt principal, which is a huge expense in the sewer fund, is not counted as an expense when you get to audit. It is an exchange of assets, cash for principal. So it doesn't show up as an expense. The fund balance in the sewer fund went down by that amount when we paid the debt service. So when you look at our monthly reports, you'll see that the actual cash goes out to pay the bonds, pay off the principal on the bonds. Let's see here. I referenced fleet already. And insurance fund, we are still, this is one of our projects to continue to work on. We still have reserves being set aside that are not funded. Those are our liability claims where we're setting aside cases that may or may not go all the way to judgment. So we still have an issue where we're incurring claims on that side of the equation for liability, workers' comp at a high rate. So general fund revenue and expenditures were close to budget. Capital were all below due to deferrals. Enterprise funds continue to reflect lower utilization. Weather, remember the technology one is lower utilization through technology. Everyone's using less water. That hits water and sewer. And then the pension fund remains probably our largest financial concern when we look at the 10-11 summary. And then just a reference, a plug you've seen, the council's seen, despite all of this activity, Moody's and Fitch confirmed our AAA ratings, and we'll have a press release tomorrow, but they've also already released their press releases. So both have very complimentary things to say about city's financial management, and even though they acknowledge our pension issues, they think that we have it under control.
I think Alderman Rainey has a question.
I do. Mr. Lyons, when communities are bankrupt, do they often receive a AAA bond rating from the rating companies?
No, that's not a possibility.
The only reason I mention that is for almost every time we have a council meeting, we hear that we are bankrupt. So I just wanted to clarify that you were pretty sure we weren't bankrupt.
And even we got referenced by the county when they just used our global liabilities and showed $300 and some million in liabilities. We have $600 million in assets. We are not a bankrupt community.
Thank you for clarifying that. Alderman Burrus?
I'm actually want clarification on page 113. It's not part of your presentation. Grandmother Park, $35,000. I thought the Illinois DNR grant was rejected. And then we have $125,000 for a private grant. Did the money come in the door?
We actually did get a notification just recently that Grandmother Park received a $25,000 grant. So they're continuing their process. When that was originally approved at the Economic Development Committee, it was a 3-year cycle that we were looking at. So after the original approval of the $50,000 city potential contribution for the land, where we would obtain the land after all was said and done, Grandmother Park had so much in time to raise the rest of the money, which was somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000.
I believe we did not, we said that we would authorize it to be paid back, not that we were giving $50,000 to the park. I think we should go back and look at that again, particularly, and I think it was contingent on getting the grant from Illinois DNR.
It was actually contingent on them getting all of the money.
Yeah, yes,
So
yes.
it was, they had to get approximately $200,000. They had to raise all of that before our funds came forward for.
I just want to make sure that we're very clear in this, because when this comes up of private donation of $125,000, we were not informed that there was $125,000 that came in.
No, just 25.
Right, but it says 100.
It says 125.
You're looking at which page?
Page
113.
It does.
I will review it and respond.
And then the DNR grant, it doesn't exist. It was rejected, so just be careful with that.
And Mr. Lyons, there's
Yes,
a $50,000 CIP and also a $30,000 for Grandmother Park. I mean, $50,000 on page 111. Fund responsible, that's economic development. And then I saw 30,000 someplace, I thought, 50,000 there. I mean, Grandmother Park is just all over here. And it just seemed to me that that was not at the top of our agenda right now.
I will confirm through the minutes and the reports, and a lot of Grandmother Park did reflect that 3-year time frame. So it may not have been revisited specifically in our last go-around with capital, but when it was, so we'll revisit that.
Also, could you tell me what the 1817 Church Street Public Arts Center study is for $30,000 under economic development?
I would defer. I'm not the best.
I'm on the committee, and I don't know anything about that.
I'll be happy to respond with the detail. That was 1817 Church?
Yeah, I just don't, I mean, I'm just concerned about what it means to be on here. I mean,
And was
does
that,
mean
I'm sorry.
It's been transferred?
No. You said it was on page, what page was
It's on
that?
page 111.
And was that in the fiscal year 2012, or was it in,
Approved 2011.
okay, thank you.
Does anyone have an answer for that?
We don't need it right now.
We'll provide it off agenda.
All right. Mr. Lyons, you can go ahead with your brief report.
Well, we're done with that one, and we were just going to move on to the first quarter report.
Mr. Lyons, why don't we just leave that at a very high level, given that it's the current first
I will not
quarter?
move through any slides.
Okay.
For the first quarter, we are in much the same position that we were last year. We have the first installment of property taxes is in. We are doing fairly well right now. Sales tax is at 29.9% of budget. It's not really a quarterly report. As you see our reports come through, this whole 10-month year, we're going to be doing 10%. So this is the 30% report. So we're at 29.9 for sales tax. We're slightly above budget for income tax. In short, we're running we're running at a surplus right now, but we always do as of May 31st because of the timing of our revenues, and that surplus disappears by September as we await for the second installment of property taxes. And again, that's all in the general fund. As far as the other funds are concerned, we are running in a similar vein where not all of our capital projects have fired off at this point, so to try and predict where the water fund will be or where the sewer fund will be or any of those, we just approved the parking fund. We don't quite have enough numbers to make sure that everything will come in at budget. So far, we are running closer to 25% of budget in most of our funds when we could be at 30%. So presently, we're on a good course. If we finish the year right now, we would be finishing in a surplus. Realistically, when we come back at the end of September, we'll be preparing the budget. We will have 2 more months' worth of numbers to put in for budget prep, and we'll have a lot better guide as to where we're at for the 2012 budget projection. And we're working on updating those numbers right now. We'll have something to talk about at the August 8th meeting as well. That's when we're going to be talking about 2012 budget. Brief enough?
Excellent.
And Mr. Lyons, there are 2 resolutions before the council this evening. Would you, SP 4.2 and SP 4.3?
Is the mayor going to, or someone going to read those, or shall I read them?
SP 4.2 is Resolution 38R11 approving amended fiscal year 2011 capital improvements program. Would anyone, Alderman Rainey?
I'm not going to read it right now because I'm not chairman of AMPW. This should be read by the chairman of the Administration Public Works Committee. I'd just like to make a comment about all this budget information. This council should not be presented with this budget information at 10:30 at night. We have aldermen, such as Alderman Burrus, et cetera, who vote against the total budgets or the total allocation of something, yet we never discuss the line items ever. And the reason we don't is it's either too late or we're too rushed or something. So it was always my understanding that when we had these opportunities for these nights that were off council nights, that we would have an opportunity to discuss this, and we're not having that opportunity. And we are criticized by our constituents, and rightfully so, because the most important thing on our agenda, we never have time to discuss. So I'm not happy with the way this was presented tonight, and I think it's important. I mean, it's just very casual. Oh, yeah, we got a AAA bond rating, and let's move on. Those things are important. It's important to discuss all of these items, and instead we're just told, rush through this resolution, and I don't like that.
And Madam Mayor, members of the
Some
council.
of us spend hours reading this stuff for naught. I absolutely am so exhausted right now. I mean, I'm only picking out a few things that I underlined, but I think we ought to have opportunities, especially when we're not in November being pressured to pass things. This tonight would have been a great night to discuss this.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, we're happy to continue the item. We would be happy to call a special meeting. You have a full agenda coming up next Monday evening. You have a full agenda 2 weeks from then. The council's dark through the rainy month of August, but we would be happy. Our intent is not to rush through this. Certainly we want to give you, we have not, I understand, traditionally given a complete report after month 12 of the fiscal year, so that was part of that. First quarter or first 30% of a year is often an opportunity just to raise red flags, which we don't believe we have flags to raise. But again, we're looking for the council's direction. If you'd like to continue this to another meeting, we'd be happy to do it.
Alderman Rainey.
We spent so much time tonight talking about not spending any money on the wind farm study. Yet here's all this money we are spending. When are we ever going to spend time talking about the money we are spending? That's what I'm asking.
Alderman Wilson.
And I agree with Alderman Rainey. In fact, coincidentally, I received a call from, I think, one of the Northwestern reporters this afternoon. And that person asked me, what do I think the most important thing on the agenda tonight was? And I said, the budget information, but I'm sure that the wind farm will get the most discussion, notwithstanding the fact that the budget is more important. So I would move that we defer this discussion and have a discussion about it until a later date.
It's been moved and seconded to just have a full discussion at a later date. Seeing no one who wants to comment, all in favor?
Madam Mayor, I just have a question. When?
Well, that is a good question, but I don't.
Included in this calendar that we've got someplace.
There's a motion on the floor, and I apologize for the interruption.
I should have specified a date. So pulling up the calendar, which is on page 117. On page 117, I would proffer for the, let's see. I don't know. September 12th seems like an awfully long time away. But that's our goal-setting session. I'm open to any other input or suggestion. It's what? No, I understand that.
We'd be happy to make time for the meeting of the 25th. I don't have the agenda schedule with me. Mr. Lyons, do you recall what the major items were for the 25th?
We did move a few things off of the 25th. Just one point of process, what we have in the packet are items that, for instance, the parking construction project. That's an $800,000 budget amendment that the council approved. This is housekeeping to get it back in a more global format, as Alderman Rainey has pointed out. And my reason for bringing that one up is that we could do that at a later date. It doesn't have to be August 8th. the items in here are not a first-time look, but they are not, and I do not mean to contradict Alderman Rainey at all. What I was pointing out was that you're right, we have not had the longer-term discussion. We've brought them to you piecemeal, and that doesn't help in global capital planning.
Alderman Rainey.
I mean, some of these things I never saw before. I mean, 1817 Church Street, economic development. I mean, I might have been absent or I might have fell asleep during the meeting, but 1817 Church Street, $30,000 for a public art center study. I have no idea what that is. All these entries by Graham, I mean, some of these things just are blatantly jumping out.
And Alderman Rainey, I think as we've talked about this, I recall what that is. And if you remember, late last summer, we had a tour of the facility. There was a concern by the Economic Development Committee of what the next steps would be. I believe during the budget process, we put money in the budget for a further review of the structural facility. I think there was lots of questions at both the CDBG Committee and Economic Development about the building, and so it was included in the capital budget, was adopted by the council over the winter.
But this says Public Art Center Study. That's what I'm concerned
And it may be poorly captioned, but I believe that is what the money was allocated for.
Well, I'm sure that money's being spent to keep up the.
And it's not been spent, Alderman Rainey.
Then, I mean, I don't.
This is the budget that the council
I'm sure I'm the
adopted.
only one who doesn't understand this, so I'm going to just be quiet, because I'll be able to figure it out. I just think that the public is entitled to hear a discussion of the financial statement and reports, and we're not doing that.
And Madam Mayor, members of the council, we'd be happy to move items around for the 25th. As a special order of business, Alderman Wilson will not be here. Alderman Tendem will also not be here. We could have a meeting the first week of August. Currently, I believe there would be evenings available, either if the council wished to not have a Rules Committee meeting on the 1st of August and would rather have a special council meeting to deal with this, we could accommodate that. I can look very quickly at the city calendar for other times there.
I think that's not a bad idea. I don't know how much we'd already have it. So the Rules Committee meeting is already on our calendar.
So they have an hour and a half currently scheduled for Rules. On August the 1st, I believe you have the Human Relations Commission coming to speak. You have a couple of references to talk about, one reference to talk about references, and I believe one other item. Certainly none of those issues are so critical that they could not wait till the September meeting of the Rules Committee. I'm looking quickly at the other evening meetings the first week of August. There is currently no meeting scheduled. There's Zoning Board of Appeals on Tuesday the 2nd of August. Nothing involving the council on the 3rd of August or the 4th of August.
I move that we move the meeting to, or I'll amend my motion that we move the meeting to the 1st of August in the Rules Committee time slot.
Alderman Rainey.
On the 8th of August, you're proposing a department, a city council update evaluation of city services.
Yes, and we anticipate that to be a few hours discussion for 2012.
Okay, but you can't, if we don't really have a grasp of what the results of 2011 are, how do we move on? That's what I don't understand. I mean, tonight was an update of revenue and expenses that should have been discussed. That's all I'm saying.
And Alderman Rainey, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just looking at your other 9 colleagues and trying to get a sense. We've provided a lot of information in writing.
So you don't think on the 8th we could include some of this discussion on the 8th?
My recommendation would be if you would like to forego rules, that would be a better use of your time. Again, we are going to, based on your direction to us back in March, On August the 8th, we are going to give you what is the result of hundreds of hours of work and hundreds of pages of documents and reports, which, based on this council's previous discussions, you're going to want as much time as you can to start digesting for the budget process.
You're right. That's very
ahead.
important. I agree.
So we're happy to spend the hour and a half from 6 to 7:30 on the 1st to answer your questions and go through these documents to whatever detail the council feels is appropriate.
I want to second Alderman Wilson's motion to do this on the Rules Committee.
Okay.
Very good.
It's been moved and seconded to have this discussion on the night of the Rules Committee meeting. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Alderman Rainey? The motion passes. Sorry.
If I could just ask for some information for that meeting. If we could have a discussion on, for example, the substance of some of the revenues and some of the expenses that might not be as routine as, it might appear. In other words, what could we do to enhance the sales tax or the this or the that? How many liquor licenses have come forth, and what part of that revenue is liquor licenses, and what part is, poured drink tax and, packaged liquor tax? I think those things are just so expensive, so important, so we'll know where to focus energies, and we never have those discussions.
So this is for the current year, for the
I
year.
understand.
I'm asking the question.
But it's going to be the same thing for next year. I mean, you got to understand. We have, aldermen who've only been here for a couple of budgets, and I just don't think that I have a good handle on how are we really doing.
And so, just so I'm clear, we can go through at a level of detail as fine as we're able to do on revenues and expenditures. Alderman Rainey, I'm just trying to give you what you like. I mean, we're at 30% into the year, and in my experience, in my time as a municipal manager, it's very difficult to spot trends in the first quarter, and that's in essence where we're at. And I think you're hearing from us that we see in our collective experience as municipal managers, municipal finance staff members, nothing unusual one quarter in. And so we're happy to talk more about that if the council would like.
Well,
but we're just trying to be mindful of all of your...
I think it's better than keeping people in the dark. That's all.
But Alderman Rainey, the staff report you have before you and the PowerPoint, is tens of pages. We provide you each month with a report at the fund level that's tens of pages. We post it on our website.
I give up. You've talked me out of it. I give up.
Well, no, there's a motion that's been approved to move forward with it. So I'm just trying to make the most of the hour and a half on the 1st of August. That's all.
Moving right along.
I have another motion, Madam Mayor. Pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes 120/2A, I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss the agenda or an agenda item regarding real estate. This agenda item is a permitted subject to be considered in an executive session and is an enumerated exception under the Open Meetings Act. This exception is 5 ILCS 120/2A, C5, and C6.
Wait 1 second before you get a second. Alderman Rainey?
We didn't vote on the calendar, did we? Or did I miss
We
it?
did not vote on the budget calendar.
My understanding is you'd like all these items moved to August the 1st.
All these items, the budget calendar? Okay, whatever.
So that you have sufficient time to ponder and question.
Does anyone want to ponder the budget calendar, or are we prepared to vote on that now?
Let's ponder it when we talk about it.
We're going to ponder. All right. The motion is to ponder. Go ahead, Alderman Wilson. Is there a second?
Second.
City Clerk, could we call the roll?
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Holmes. Aye. Alderman Grover.
Aye.
Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Burrus. Aye. Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
7
7-0.
to 0, the motion passes. We're adjourning to executive session.